Does anyone want to lead the Pledge of Allegiance tonight? All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Hartford Select Board to order at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, August 17th. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Any volunteers want to lead us? Okay, thank you, Joe.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Okay, we have no business before us as the local control board. Anything that we want to add or change on the order of agenda? Anybody? No? Okay, I want to, we keep forgetting to, on the official agenda, put in a break. So we're going to have a little break at some point in here for 5 or 10 minutes, just to let you know. And I want to welcome Lanny, who wasn't with us last week, except for on the phone. So welcome to be here in presence. Thank you. And Mike, again, welcome to you.
Thank you.
And I guess we'll start with, if there's any public comments, you can come up to the microphone and state your name, your town of residence. We ask that there be no personal attacks, and you'll have 3 minutes to present your information to us for anything that's not on the agenda. Are you monitoring the?
Yeah, so if anyone's wondering why I look at my phone a lot, it's to see if any attendees are raising their hand via Zoom. So I'm not fixing my phone, I promise.
And do we have some people that are attending by Zoom?
We do.
Great, okay, perfect, okay. So I guess there's no public comment at this time. We'll move to select board comments and announcements.
Where do we start on that?
Just raise your hand. And, yeah,
Okay, sorry.
yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So, anybody out there watching? Took me well over 6 years of sitting out there and 4 failed elections. And I guess what they say is 5th time's a charm. Maybe I don't say that. But anyways, I'm sure just like many of you that are sitting here, I was flabbergasted when I won this election. So I hope that I will continue to, or I will attempt to do my best for the citizens of town of Hartford and carry forth in the manner that they expect me. I just hope that anything that I can work with this board on will be in a civil and manner that we'll be able to conduct business to better the town of Hartford.
Thank you, Lanny. We only operate in a civil manner, so there won't be any problems there.
Welcome, Wayne.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Then we don't have any appointments this evening, so we'll head over to Tracy for the town manager's report and significant activity report. When you're ready, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not used to y'all moving so quickly. So here we go. The town manager report includes one item that we talked about, I think at the end of July or beginning at our last meeting, about the process for an emergency ordinance. Good news, bad news. There is no process for an emergency ordinance. So that's the bad news. The good news is that there is a process for a regular old ordinance. So I provided that information to each of you in my town manager's report. One thing to consider is that by the time it gets to you, it's been through a number of drafts, revisions, feedback from the staff, looked at from our legal counsel, who again, doesn't necessarily work for the town or prioritize the town's work. So we need to make sure that that fits in with their work. So those are kind of some of the unknowns in terms of taking time to draft an ordinance. Those are all the things that we can't really necessarily promise on a perfect schedule as we work with outside parties. For some of the ordinances in which you all have communicated with about, you know, shooting off guns in various places in town, you know, various parking meter type ordinances. I've heard a couple of you discuss like vulgar language on flags ordinances. Those are the kind of things that we'll be vetting very heavily through both our council and VLCT, who provides us with our risk and liability counsel on those sorts of things. So those are some heavy hitters in terms of ordinances that can take some time to make sure we get them right and we're on the up and up and we have fully thought through all of this.
Excuse me, Tracy. So as a minimum for people watching, the minimum is probably about 44 days to get through that process. Is that correct?
It's about 60 days
Okay.
by the first time y'all read it.
Yeah. So it's not something that's going to happen quickly. I just want people to know that this is a state guides.
We are required to follow a number of external things. So when it comes to you for the first time, it will come to a select board meeting for discussion and voting. We have to post it in 5 conspicuous places in town. We have to publish it in the newspaper, and then we have to give the residents significant amount of time to bring forth a petition to put it up to a vote on town meeting day. You're right. If that goes all smoothly, it's about 60 days from that first reading. So we can anticipate anything that comes up 2 months later is when we'll actually enact that ordinance.
Mike, go ahead.
Chris, you know how many signatures are required on the petition to get it to the ballot?
I don't. That's a really good question. Offhand, a good ballpark could be 10%, 10 to 20%.
Does the select board have the option of placing an ordinance before the voters on the ballot without petition?
That's another good question. And I can find that out for you.
Kim, go ahead.
I do think, but
Okay.
I tried to look up what the,
And remember with your mask and being away from the mic that we might not pick you up very well.
I tried to look up what the state laws regarding that would do. Did you already research that a bit in your personal experience with this situation? Like, do we know
Yeah.
what the state law is for firearms being used in neighborhoods?
The only, as far as the firearm situation, the only guidance is it cannot be shot, no shooting towards a residential street.
Oh, right.
And that's really it. And each municipality throughout the state has its own guidelines and ordinances. So, and that's where the kind of the rub of that particular ordinance is.
I'm sure Hartford Police Department know that probably.
Yes,
too. Yeah.
yes. There is a noise ordinance, but that's only, after sundown. And so that doesn't take care of any situation that has arisen, like I said, during the day.
Yeah, I think so. For next steps, anything you all want me to begin to research a little bit more deeply, direction from you all in terms of what we're interested in doing an initial draft through the staff is always helpful. And until then, we'll just wait for that holding pattern in terms of what the next steps would be for any of these ordinances that you all have brought forth in the past. The next item I wanted to update everyone on is that we have the ongoing investigation with the officer involved shooting that happened on the 5th of August. The Vermont State Police is still conducting their investigation. At this time, they perform that investigation completely independently. I remain available, as does the entirety of the police department and the rest of the staff as needed, but they perform that investigation without us. And only update us when they have completed a portion of it. They have not updated us at this point. Once that happens, the state and county attorney general's offices will perform investigations of their own, and then we will contract out for our own investigation as per all of the laws, rules, and regulations that we follow as a police department in the state of Vermont.
Next question.
Yes.
So one question about this incident. What is the town doing to provide counseling services for Officer Clifford?
Yeah, all employees have access to a number of different resources for when something happens to them in the line of their work. One thing that all town employees has available to them is the EAP, or the Employee Assistance Program, that provides staff members with a number of opportunities to reach out to counselors, to various mental health professionals, a wide variety of people who can provide resources, all the way from, crafting legal documents and finding support services. So the officer has opportunities to take that into
Do
consideration.
you know if there's anything available to the police department specifically for officer-involved shootings that the rest of the general public is not privy to?
We're using kind of the standards that we have for all incidences. So post-incident action reports mean that the staff members who were involved do have a chance to debrief That's not the case here because we are in the middle of an active investigation. So normally, if there was something that didn't involve the officer or we had the state police coming in, we would do some work internally in terms of after action briefings and debriefings and working within the community. But unfortunately, because this is an active investigation and we are under the constraints of the state police, really EAP and their private insurance is what they have available to them right now. As always, I am happy to meet with other state and local federal officials to tell them about Hartford, explain what we need as a community, show them how amazing the progress is that we're making, and show off some of our amazing projects. So I was able to meet with Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray, who is a big advocate of tax incremental funding, loves what we're doing with downtown, and appreciates the work that we're all doing to make progress in the state of Vermont. We are a small town that's growing. We're trying a lot of new things, and we're really being looked at as a model by some of those smaller towns in the under 10,000 person grouping. I also had an opportunity to meet with Haley Perro, who is a member of Senator Bernie Sanders' staff. We discussed the ongoing housing crisis that continues to hamper Hartford as well as the entire state and quite frankly, the whole country, and looking specifically at affordable and workforce housing. We also discussed childcare, as both of those are significant drivers of economic growth in communities. And finally, I got to meet with Amtrak Government Affairs. They came in to discuss their plans for revitalizing their infrastructure and increasing service. What I really appreciated from both of them is they are emphasizing that Amtrak is an environmentally friendly way to see New England. You're out of your car, you're in the train, and they offer a lot of stops in little towns. And that also it's a social equity offering, because if you don't have a vehicle, we can still get you around a little bit slower with the use of a train. And I really appreciated that those are two of the things that Amtrak is bringing forth to the federal level. And finally, just from me, I want to say thank you to Cover and Northern Stage for having me out. As always, I love to get out in the community, and I had a great time with Bill from Cover and Irene from Northern Stage as they showed me all the good works they're doing in the community. In terms of SIG-Acts or significant activities, you'll see that things are still hopping here in the town of Hartford. We've got a lot of different public works processes going on. The assessor remains diligent in wrapping up both the current tax year and getting ready for the next tax year. It doesn't stop over there. Parks and Rec is booming, and police and fire are handling the usual summer calls, which means we have a number of different calls as people get out in the world and out in the community. I'm happy to answer any questions or take anything back that we need to grab from the staff.
Any comments, anybody?
On the Amtrak visit, was the Montreal brought up at all about restoring that?
Yeah, Montreal was brought up. There were a couple of things that they were telling me about. One is that the tracks up there are old and have not been used in quite some time. So there's some infrastructure that needs to happen. Also, since the last time they went to Montreal, processes at the border have changed drastically, and they are working diligently across two different countries' borders to figure out how to get people across the border on a train. If anybody's been on the train, they have a little bit more of a lax security system, and to cross an international border means that they need to comply with many of the things that we've all gotten used to when we go to an airport.
Thank you.
I'm excited. I told them that personally, I was really looking forward to the day that they can bring back the Montreal train.
I've done it.
I rode on one of the last ones up there on it when it was the Montrealer.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Okay, board reports, motions, and ordinances. And I hear-
All right.
Gail?
Gail,
When you're
that's
ready, Gail.
you. flying right along with me here.
Don't jinx us.
Before I start, I just saw, can you send another email about the manifest and the payroll? Do we know if you have that in your, if we have it or not?
Neither Tracy nor I could find it in our email. And which is not a big deal, but I think we shouldn't approve it.
Right. So if we don't have it, when I get done my presentation, I will find it
Leave it in the middle.
and then have it available.
Great. And we need August 7th payroll and August 10th AP manifest, I think.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to just share my screen, please. And I feel lost around. Very long. Sorry, I was all logged in and ready to go.
You get the hang of it. I know.
So before I bring up my first presentation, again, welcome Mike and Lanny to everybody. I'm Kate Ostroud, I'm the finance director for the town of Hartford. And in your packet, I gave you a lot of information to review. So I have two different ways that I can present this. I have one that's just a summary page of the financials, which talks about just the total numbers, or I can bring up the packet that I provided in for each of you. So whichever you would like, I can do it either way. If you have a preference.
Kim, go ahead.
I mean, I would say maybe a little more specific, especially because we have new members, like there's things that I'm kind of familiar with and I think it would just help us gain a better understanding.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, there. Let me.
I'm sure everyone would be happy.
Are you sharing just that window or are you sharing,
You know where to find all the information anyway, but if you ever have things that anyone can help with, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah. can I drive for a second?
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to get shared.
Or board of finance.
I've been on boards of directors where it's an actual assignment.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like,
No, That's,
Yeah.
I wish I had one.
Mhm.
You know?
Joe.
I still wish I had, well,
You're welcome. You go to the next one. I might need
you
Oh, I got you. yours.
done yeoman's work. Keeping me impressed.
Okay, everybody, I think that I'm ready now. I do apologize for the delay. So what we're going to be discussing first is agenda item 5A, which is 2021 financial summary. It's pre-audit information. That means that it's not audited. We will be having our audit in October. We're still online. Unless something really unfortunate happens, you will have it in your hands prior to Thanksgiving, usually the second week of November. We take quite a bit of pride in doing that. And so it comes at a perfect time because we're also talking about the budget during that time frame. And for new board members, you'll see me at least 4 times a year, if not more than that. Part of my position is I provide quarterly statements for you and for the public. Certainly, if you would like to see them more frequently, all of the department heads and the town manager receive them on a monthly basis.
Gail, does the audit tend to change any numbers in any significant way?
The only thing that really changes, excuse me, is how the government side is handled. So when I say government side, we have many different funds. So we have several funds that are considered to be government funds versus our enterprise funds, which are made up of our solid waste, our 2 waters, and our 2 wastewaters.
Okay.
So the enterprise funds are very cut and dry, and what you see is what you get. With the government funds, because there's so many moving pieces, what we're looking at is only Fund 10, but you have to take into consideration all of the other government funds that come into it. So we have a TIF district, which is considered to be a government fund. We have another fund, which is called the Capital Fund, which is Fund 80. That's where the Sykes Mountain Roundabout, that's one of the most popular ones, lives in that. So what you see here for the general fund, these numbers won't change a whole lot. If I did my job correctly and everybody else did their job correctly, they won't change a whole lot. But when we get the actual financial statements, you'll see a lot of them consolidated. We'll walk through them.
Okay.
And the current audit firm that we have is really good and very user-friendly and very welcoming to answer any questions. But in the meantime, if you have questions, you certainly can reach out to myself or reach out to Tracy.
All right, thank you.
Probably a little bit more than what you wanted to know. That's okay.
Very useful. Thank you.
Okay. So again, we're looking at this, it's pre-audit, and on the summary page that you have, we're going to talk about the appropriations first. So appropriations mean expenses for those that are new or are listening online. Again, I have to state it again, these are pre-audit. So for the 2021 budget, which was approved by you, the board, and the voters, was $17,609,829.55. With the expenses as of June 30th, which includes encumbrances, which we're going to be talking about in my 3rd presentation, we had $16,589,801. So we came in at 94% of the budget that we utilized. You'll see that in 2020, we came in at 94% too. I actually went back and checked that 3 times because I was like, wow. But I did round it up to whole numbers. So if you, anyways, so we did very well. I'm very pleased with how we ended given with COVID. And we had several departments that were, their revenues were way down because they just, WAB as an example. And Scott Hausler and his team were very innovative and tried to come up with different ways for revenue, but they were also very mindful of their expenses. So finishing at 94%, I don't think that anybody would have anything to complain about given the last year that we've been in. Any questions before I move on to the revenue piece of it?
If we don't lose track of it, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but the budget cycle ends on what date?
June 30th.
Okay.
It's our fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th. So moving on to the revenue part of it, we do budget zero budget base. budgeting, which means whatever we budget for revenue should match our expenses. So you'll see in 2021, the budget for revenue we put in was 17,609,829.55. That was the amount that was approved by the board and by the voters. We were able to collect 16,981,902.51. So again, we're at 96%, same as 2020. Again, I checked it 3 times, making sure that it just wasn't in sort of an error, but it did come back correct. So again, given what we went through for COVID and the amount of changes that everybody had to make, coming in at 96% is very well. That does include about $200,000 that we received in COVID funds, which helped offset anywhere from lost ambulance calls all the way up to hand sanitizer, the extra cleaning that we've had to do. So that did help bring it up a little bit. Again, no concerns as far as the revenue part goes for Fund 10. Any questions before I move down the sheet? We're going to talk about each department as I move through the transaction, but I just want to discuss the summary page first. Okay. So part of my quarterly presentation also includes delinquent taxes, because that's a big question. Everybody wants to know, how are we doing? How are things going? And so looking at our delinquent taxes, I'm going to move from left to right. So I'm going to start at 6/30/2019. And so when we finished, and I put a couple of years in here just so everybody can see the trend of where we're at, because I think it's really, really important. So at the end of 2019, we had 917,921 in delinquent taxes. For a rule of thumb, as a finance director, I do not like to see it above $1 million. We like to see it $1 million or less. So at the end of 2019, the fiscal year, as I said, we were at 917,921.74. At the end of 2020, it was actually reduced. We went to 832,783. Key points to look at here is the total that we carried from 2019 was, again, 917,921. If you move over one column to delinquent taxes, 6/30/20, you'll see that when we finished 2020, we only had 314,684 out of the 917 that we carried forward. So during fiscal year 2020, we actually collected a little over 600,000 of what was carried forward from 19. So that's kind of, you're seeing now why I'm showing you the trend as we're moving. For the fiscal year 2020, we did carry forward of those taxes 518, which is lower than the 631 for 2019 for that particular year. So we did trend down in 2020. We went down overall to 832, $700.83. Excuse me. Now moving over to the last column on the left, which is 6/30/2021. The total that we are carrying forward for delinquent taxes is 936,254. That is higher than our 19 balance. It is higher than our 2020 balance. However, if you, again, let's do the same exercise. If you look at what we're carrying forward from 2020, we carried forward $700.83. We received, almost half of it, a little bit less than half. I think it came up to like 42%. So we have a balance of 486. That's nothing to sneeze about, given the year that we've had. So of the 832,000, we end up with 486 that we're carrying forward from previous years. We're in good shape. We're in good shape for that. And then overall, again, for 2021, the delinquent taxes for those is $449,689. So as you can see, from 19, it was 631,
Mhm.
2020, it was 518, 2021, 449. So it did, it's a higher number, but we're seeing the trend of the past due amounts are coming down, the overall amount. And of course, it's going to be a higher number because the tax rate, the taxes were higher. So you're going to see an increase every year. So I hope I made that as clear as mud.
Gail, are these, oh, sorry.
And we'll go Dennis, we'll go to Mike.
Wait first.
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Okay. So of the part that, I agree that with all we've been through, it's good. Still some sadness there. So the parts that haven't been collected, is that headed for abatement or tax sales, or we're still working with people on that?
I'm not aware of any current tax sales that we have. Most individuals have come in and have made payment arrangements. A lot of individuals utilized by their own choice, some of the government funding that was available. They chose to come in and pay up a lot of their delinquent taxes that they may have had.
They got some assistance on that.
They received assistance, correct?
Good. Thank you.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I basically had the same question as Dennis, just because I noticed, it looks like part of the balance goes back to the taxes back to 2009, right? So I was just wondering what sort of the mechanism was, what the time frame is for the repayment of taxes, whether at some point we just reach a time when we would do something like a tax sale.
If individuals are if they've come in and they've made a payment arrangement, they can take as much time as they would like.
Yep.
If they're making an effort to bring their account up to balance, then we certainly appreciate that and don't want to penalize them for even the smallest amounts that they're able to.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Yes, go ahead.
Do you have these numbers by chance broke down as far as a percentage of what actual taxes were due versus what was collected as far as a percentage? Like we collected 917, 921, 74, and 630, 2019. What percentage of actual taxes due is that?
I don't have that in front of me, no, but I could get that for you if you want.
Here, where the trend is as far as if you're tracking it that way. Don't make a special effort, but if you could email me that information, would be nice.
Sure.
Thank-
So if I understand you correctly, you would like to know what the percentage is at the end of the fiscal year, the
Yeah.
delinquent tax of what was budgeted for revenue?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have that information. We could do that math.
I was just gonna say, we
Where
do
is
have,
that? Yeah, but
we do
where
have
is-
2021 and we do have 2020 here in front of us.
So you're saying the 17, 609,
Correct. So for 2021, we
that's for
budgeted
2021, yeah, but that's not showing
Actually,
me.
then we would have to wait until we get to the revenue side of it, and the
Yeah.
detailed revenue side, because the number that's here, the 17,609,829 is all revenue for the general fund. So that would include everything from services to taxes. So when we get, but you do have that information in your packet.
Okay, when we get there, you put it out to me, because I'm not
Yeah, I
as
will.
up on this as you
I
are.
will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just have one more question. Gail, you mentioned sort of a rule of thumb of keeping the delinquent tax number under $1 million. What's sort of the reasoning of that? I mean, is there something at $1 million?
So it's a rule of thumb for me as the
Okay.
finance director. When I came on board here, I did quite the analysis of the Hartford's financial statements and looking to see what the trend is and seeing what's sustainable for the town. Because obviously, the higher the delinquent taxes go, the more challenging you have for a cash flow.
Sure.
So because we do utilize accrual accounting, we do show the full revenue amount and then it's offset by the delinquent part of it. So again, when I came on board 5 years ago, I did an analysis. I did 10 years worth and looked to see where we were at and to see if sustainability and $1 million is a good number. And I say that because, again, we end our fiscal year in June. Our next true revenue event that we have is in August.
Right.
So we're looking at July and most of August before we actually have cash in our hand. Sufficient cash. And during during July and August, we have substantial payments that, that we're committed to put out. So that's kind of my rule of thumb.
Yep.
To making sure if it goes above $1 million, I get a little, I get a little dizzy.
All right.
And a little bit nervous, and that keeps me up at night. So other
Thank you.
people may, find that it's too high. Some may think that it's too low, but the analysis that I did shows that it are sustainable at that point.
Thank you.
I just got a note from a citizen saying that they couldn't log into the meeting for some reason.
Okay, I don't know about the information out there. I don't know, CATV, did you check the link? And Kim, other people have gotten through, correct?
Yeah, there's like 5.
Are the people on Zoom? Does it, or so they can't get in on Zoom?
Yeah, usually what happens is if one of you gets like an email from one person, you just usually give them the link again through your own email or, whatever is available. I can forward you the link as well.
What can you do right now? Not everything is like it was.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, go when you're ready.
Okay,
Thanks.
so moving down to the bottom of the page, the unassigned fund, that's a topic for everybody. And again, I've included 2019, 2020, 2021. I do need to remind you again that 2021 is pre-audit, but I don't suspect that it's going to change a whole lot. Board guidance for 2021 budget was to be at 16%, and we're at 17%. So it may be alarming that we went down from 2020, we went from 18% down to the 17% that we're at right now. I'm not losing any sleep over it. We, again, not going to beat a dead horse. We went through a lot in 2021, and 17% is still above what the board was looking to achieve. And does anybody have any questions regarding that?
I hate to ask so many questions.
No,
It's just
go
the first
ahead,
time I'm
go
seeing
ahead.
some of these things, but it's unassigned. Is this money that can be assigned to any purpose if it's not already committed somewhere? Is it essentially like a rainy day money? Is it?
It is considered to be a rainy day fund.
Okay.
And I'm glad that you asked this question, Mike, because this is another example of this. The unassigned fund takes into account for all of the government funds, number one. So as I mentioned to you, it's Fund 10, which is the general fund. And then I mentioned to you the TIF fund, and then Fund 80. So I'm bringing up Fund 80 again because we all know that we have a lot of construction going on. So with that, we were fortunate enough that most of those projects are funded at either 80 or 90% from a grant.
Okay.
The town is required to pay those funds up front, and then we receive a reimbursement. So at the end of 2021, and don't quote me on this, I'm just going to say, we may have $1 million that we've paid out to all of our contractors that we're waiting on grant reimbursements. So that particular fund could show that we're in the negative by 1 million. But we really aren't, because we are carrying a receivable for it. But cash wise, for financial reasons wise, you have to show that we're carrying a deficit, and that will be showing in our audit as well. And we'll talk about that as it comes up, because it shows each fund and it'll show that it's a negative, and we'll talk about it's because we're waiting on grant reimbursements. And we're now in August. Most of them we've already received already, but it's where you stand as of June 30th. So again, it is an unassigned fund. They do consider it to be a rainy day fund. The stipulation that goes along with it, it does require board approval for those funds to be utilized. And when we do the budget, if the funds are going to be utilized to offset the budget, such as we did in 2021 and in 2020 and in 2022, the board and the voters approve for a certain portion of the unassigned fund to be utilized to balance the budget.
Okay. So is this a yearly number? Like, is there more? Is this like you add up each year the unassigned funds, or have these unassigned funds from other fiscal years been spent?
The total that's in front of you, the 2021, the 3,049,273.
Yeah.
That's the amount
That's
that that is currently
Okay.
there.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Correct. And it's a number that's really hard to give to you until you get to the end of the year.
Mhm.
And I say that because the town of Hartford does collect the taxes. We send out the taxes for the entire town, which includes the school district.
Okay.
So as we collect the taxes, we make payments, scheduled payments to the school. And until the final cash flow comes in from the state that tells us what we actually have to pay them, we start paying them in advance because we know that they're going to have to get a big chunk of it,
Right.
which they're entitled to. So it's kind of difficult. I monitor it. It's much easier usually when I get to about the end of March, beginning of April, we have a better idea. But that's why we do the monthly financial reports with the department heads and with the town manager. And that way, if we see something going astray,
Yeah.
we can be on top of it, because the last thing that we want to have is a deficit for anything.
Okay. Thanks.
And if I'm giving too much information, somebody just, just trying to be mindful of new members, everybody's on board.
There you go.
Did it go?
Yeah, it's just a little sticky.
Interestingly enough, it's not scrolling down on my screen. Okay.
You're right. That is really creepy.
Lucky for all of you, I have a printed version, so I'll just work from this. So this is the breakdown per department. The town of Hartford has several different departments, and we'll be looking at each one of them as we do. Excuse me, we start the budget process. So the first one is the select board, and up there you will see I put in the 2021 budget as well as the 2020 budget. Normally what happens on a quarterly basis is we show you where we're at this year and where we were at last year. So for the select board, they've used 94% of their budget for 2021, and last year they used 100% of it. So I'm just going to go down through these, and if you have questions, just interrupt me, please. So boards and commissions. This was a little bit challenging. Again, you're going to get sick of me saying this. With COVID, a lot of the boards and commissions weren't able to do a lot of the things that they had planned on doing, which was very unfortunate. So for boards and commissions, they use 76% of their budget in comparison to last fiscal year. Excuse me, 2020, they utilized 100% of it. Sorry about that. Looking at the administrative manager, which apparently I don't know how to spell very well today. This is the question that Kim had, this is the prime opportunity to bring it up. Kim had a question. She wanted to know why the budget amount for 2021 for the administrative manager department is different than what's in the budget book. The numbers that are in the budget column, they say budget, is the net budget. What that means is throughout the fiscal year, we've had to make adjustments within departments. So an example for the administrative department, the administrative managed department, we hadn't planned on hiring a town manager. We had not planned on having a couple interim managers. So the administrative manager department did not have funding for that. Each one of the departments gave up part of their funding in their budget, and we transferred that money to the administrative department. So we would be able to hire an interim town manager. So we would be able to hire a search firm. And so that's just one example of why the number in the budget column that you're seeing does not, it may or may not match what's in the budget book. But I will remind you all, as I did remind Kim, you as a board approved the bottom line of the budget. The voters approved the bottom line of the budget. The town manager is responsible on a daily basis to make sure that each department is funded appropriately. So, and when the audit does come out, you will see what the approved amount was for each. Actually, they put it into categories, but it's pretty easy to break down. You'll see the amount that was approved by you as the board and the voters, which is the total of 17 million. 829.55. So hopefully if you had questions and you were looking at the budget book as well and was wondering why there was a difference, that's what the difference is. And
So if, which I have not done, but so if we were to add up all of the 2021 budget amounts in
it
here.
comes up with 17,609. And the same thing for the 2020.
They're just in different places.
Correct. Yep. So at the end of the day, when you have all the pluses and the minuses, when you get to the bottom, it should be a 0 in that adjustment column.
Question. This I think would be very interesting for us to look at come budget time. The boards and commissions that you have here, 2020, 100%, and 2021, 76%. Do you have those somewhere broken down individually? It would give us a good idea come budget time whether certain boards and commissions might need more funding to do their jobs or not. So is that broken down as far as individual?
So it is broken down in the budget. It's broken down by each board and each commission, which I certainly can provide to you. It is the responsibility of each board and each commission to come forward if they are looking for funding, if they need additional funding. It's so I certainly can provide it, but I'm letting you know that it is something that it is their responsibility to come forward if they need. It's very similar to, I would just say the COVID committee, the COVID committee, there were money set aside for that. That wasn't a budgeted amount, but it would be an example if there's a commission or a board that they need funding for something, the homelessness committee, the energy committee, or commission, I'm probably using the wrong words, I'm sorry. But it is their responsibility. If they would like funding, they come on their night that they're assigned on the budget cycle, and they give a presentation just like everybody else does.
But if they are halfway or 3/4 of the way tapped out for the year, and they're tapped out, do they have the ability to come before the board to ask for more funding for the remaining portion of the year? Or is that cut in stone that what we've given them is what we've given them?
What they can do. Do you mind if I
No,
take
go
this?
for it, because I barely was able to touch on this when I first started.
Sure. So what they can do is they could come forward and say that they have a project that it's running over. Again, keeping in mind, you as the board and you as the voters approved the bottom line of the budget. So a board or commission could come to you and make the request. That would be a discussion that would happen between the board and the town manager. The town manager would need to look to see if within the budget, we were able to find funding to cover that. But we're not required to do that.
And because as you said, we've had the COVID commission, which was something that was not expected.
Correct.
That was, I don't know how much money they had expended on their outreach that they've done, so.
Right, so anytime that there's a change, again, poor Tracy, not to beat her, but, her particular department there was no money budgeted to replace the town manager, to hire the interim town manager. So decisions had to be made across the town. Many of us gave up our travel line items because none of us were traveling, or gave up. I had a vacancy in my department, so I gave up some of my salary to fund that position. But again, it's made at the town manager down level how to move those funding pieces. Most recently, we had the homelessness encampment. There was a couple of encampments that we needed to clean up. We were able to use the funding that was in the boards and commissions for the homelessness committee to cover that. However, if it went above and beyond what was allotted in that particular line item, Tracy would have come to us and say, I'm short $20,000. Can you look at your budget? Can you tell us what can you go without? Or has your need changed? Those are very common questions. Has your need changed since we've written the budget? And have those hard discussions. And department heads, Paula can vouch for it, many department heads, those are hard discussions that we have. And we have to come and say, our need has changed or something has changed. Can you give up something? So, but again, talking at the board level, you do the total budget, bottom line, voters do the bottom line. The town manager does the daily with the department heads going down.
Thank you.
Okay. How are we doing on time? I don't want to take over time. So going down, so the election administration, they utilized 98% of their budget in 2021. In 2020, they utilized 99% of it. Advice and litigation, that's our legal part. 2021, we utilized 43%. In 2020, we utilized 100%. And I think all of us have been here long enough that we understand why there was a big change in the legal litigation. 2020 was a challenging year as far as a lot going on with the town. A lot of legal assistance was needed. So then moving down to vital statistics, which is also part of the town clerk's office. And they utilized 97% of their 2021 budget. In 2020, they utilized 100% of it. Moving down to the municipal offices, in 2021, they utilized 98% of their budget. In 2020, they utilized 100% of it. Financial management, that's my department. In 2021, I utilized 99% of my budget. In 2020, we utilized 93% of it. Next one is the auditing, 100% in 2021 and 2020. That's because we have a contract with our audit firm, so that doesn't usually change. And then the last one for this page is evaluation, which is the assessor's office. In 2021, they utilized 98% of it. In 2020, they utilized 97% of it. Would you like me to continue on going through each one of these, or would you like me to skip to the?
I was gonna ask that. Is there anyone that people want to pull out just so you don't have to repeat all the numbers?
I can skip, if you don't have further questions regarding the general fund, I can skip to the enterprise funds. And we'll just do the summary pages on those unless you have specific questions. Those ones are very cut and dry.
I do have one question on the ambulance write-offs. Is this number that we have presented to us, the expenses that we're writing off, where's the trend going there? Have you seen a trend with this as far as over the last few years where we're trending for paying off this write-offs?
So I don't have the numbers in front of me. I do know I can get them for you very easily. Scott Cooney, the fire chief, did the presentation for the annual write-off within the last 3 months, I think.
Yeah.
So Those numbers would be easily to find, that I could provide them to you. I don't have them here in front of me to provide them to you.
Right. The reason I ask is I see the 2020 is 75,093 and 2021 is 93,239. So we're writing off another $200,000 in expenses. I'm just hoping that we can go that trend the other direction instead of direction it's heading.
Well, again, 2021 was it was a very challenging year. That also looks back, we have a look back period. I believe that we write off the, Scott's probably listening and correct me, it's either the 5th year or the 4th year. Every 5th or 4th year is when we do the write-off. So we go back, we have the look back period of, so we could be writing off the 93,000 that we wrote off in 2021 could have been for fiscal year 2016 or fiscal year 2017.
Okay, so it's not just 1 year, just 5 years.
Correct.
Okay,
So we drop off that 5th, it's either the 4th or the 5th year that we drop off every year. And that's something that the previous administration was a little bit slow on getting on board. And so I believe one of the years we had a very, very high write-off because it was captured of multiple years. And now we have a regular procedure and policy that's in place that every year the fire chief will come in front of you and request that we have that written off. But I can certainly, if you would like, I can have him reach out to you and email you the trend of what he's seeing.
It would be nice to know, and if there's a way to correcting that trend, I guess, towards collecting more than we're writing off. I'm not sure if that's something that's, I'd like to see the numbers, I guess, would be interesting.
Right, and I can appreciate that. However, the fire department makes every effort to make payment arrangements with whatever individuals are able to pay, whether it's $1 a month or if it's $5 a month, they're making an effort to do it. So I think that our hands are really tied on very similar with our property taxes and the water and sewer. If the individuals don't have the funds to pay it, we don't really have any other mechanism. We have started an online payment for individuals to utilize if they would like to use their credit card or their debit card to pay online if it's easier for them for their ambulance services. But again, it's really difficult, but I will have the fire chief get you the history, reach out to you, and that way you can see the trend.
There you go.
Can I ask one more just general fund question before we move to enterprise? So if we spent 94% of the budget and we collected 96% of the revenue, does that remaining 2% just go into unassigned fund?
It does.
Great.
So we're all in agreement. I'm going to skip to Fund 30.
What page are you going to?
1 of 12 solid waste from 30.
So it starts with attachment 2 called Enterprise Fund.
Page 19 in the overall agenda.
Okay.
Okay, so this is solid waste. This is Fund 30, what we call Fund 30. And again, this is a pre-audit, but I don't suspect it to be changing a whole lot. And so for 2021, the budget was 952, 630.49. The amount of expenses was 685, 735.35. We utilized 72% of that budget versus in 2020, we utilized 83%. Keeping in mind that the hours of service, the type of service has significantly changed at the solid waste facility. Do remind all of you as we start the budgeting cycle that it's really important that we talk about Fund 30. Ahead of the game. As far as the revenue goes, this does include the transfer from the general fund. Every year, the general fund transfers over anywhere from 200,000 to 300,000 every year to help cover the curbside recycling. So it does include that. In 2021, for Fund 30, we budgeted 922,183.50. For revenue, as you can see, is substantially lower at 691, 647.17. Is it concerning? You know, again, I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. We've talked about Fund 30 quite a bit. The good thing is you will see that the expenses are lower than what were budgeted. So the revenue at 75% is in line with the expenses. So not any extra concern than what we've already discussed. Any questions for Fund 30? I'm gonna skip through the details for Fund 30.
Yes, I thought I had one thing on Fund 30.
Yeah.
Construction and demolition. That C&D waste coming in, is that what that is?
My understanding from it, and I'm not an expert on it, and Teresa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that it's coming into the facility. And Hannah did talk about it. Hannah Tyler, the department director of Public Works, did speak about the pile. I think that she did a presentation that showed what we have, how big it is, and I think she used Jeremy Delisle as the pinpoint or comparison.
Yeah.
So it is, and
I assume as
Receiving it.
much, but I just want to make sure that.
yes, yeah.
Thank you.
And
Sorry, put into it. Okay.
Fund 50. So Fund 50 is for the White River Water, and again, I have to say it's pre-audit, but I don't see any big changes coming through. In 2021, there was a budget put together and approved for $1,175,384. The amount of expenses is $692,495. They utilized 59% of their budget versus last year, they utilized 100% of it.
Kim, go ahead.
Sorry, scroll past it. What was the 1%? Never, oh yeah, this, the general operations. Why is the
I mean, the general operations revenue with, for 2021, we budgeted about 146,000 and our revenue was 1,500.
yeah.
So general operations includes transfers in from reserves for projects.
Huh.
So if we don't have the expense, you don't have the transfer come in. So
Okay.
revenue was budgeted at $1,167,831. The amount of revenue that was collected is $999,723.83, 86%. So that kind of comes into play, Kim, with the question that you have. You know, the overall revenue may be good. And it could be that collections were much higher. People may have paid in on their past ones. We may have had more connections. So there's many moving pieces that go along with it. The general operations part of it is when we're taking funds from reserves or impact fees to offset expenses. So if the need wasn't there, the funds were not transferred. Questions before I move to Fund 55? Sorry, I'm still not seeing it on my screen, so I'm trying to maneuver up there so everybody can.
You close it and bring it back up again. Like reboot.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So Fund 55 is our Queechee Water, as I stated when we began this. We have 2 water plants and we have 2 water districts, Queechee, and then we have the White River that we just barely talked about. This is the Queechee Water, and for 2021, the budget for expenses were $435,552.65. The amount of expenses were $234,047.72. They utilized 54% of their budget, versus in 2020, they utilized 68% of their budget. In 2021, they, for revenue, they budgeted $437,285. The amount of revenue collected was $436,056.71, which is 100%, versus in 2020, we were at 85%. Questions before I move on?
Maybe a comment. I think you've instilled this since you've been here, but I haven't spoke about it much lately, but I hate the use it or lose it approach to this stuff, and obviously they didn't just spend all the money, so it might be a headache for you to keep track of all that, but I'm glad that we're not in the use it or lose it mode for the most part.
Makes sense.
What, Gail, I have one question.
Sure.
Page 7 to 12 for 55. 104% of the administration in 2021. What was the reason for going over on that? You know,
I have the detail in front of me, maybe, but I can find out for you. Oh, I do know what it is. All of the invoice cloud fees played a big role in it.
yeah, makes sense.
For, if everybody familiar, Mike, are you familiar with the invoice cloud fees? So we have an online system. It's a third-party system that allows our residents to pay water and sewer taxes
Okay, yep.
and their property taxes online. And when COVID hit, the board made the decision that that the town would absorb those fees versus the resident. So those were some big numbers. I know that was one big piece of it.
I wish I had utilized that before we took it off, because I paid a hefty sum when I paid my taxes online.
Yeah.
A very hefty sum.
2.99%.
Yes,
So did that answer your question, Lynn?
yes, thank you.
Okay.
That makes complete sense.
I'm not saying that it was all of it, but I do know that was
No,
a significant portion.
That'll make a lot of sense. Yeah.
For it.
Was that 170,000-ish?
I don't have the number and I don't have
Yeah,
the exact number in front of me,
I'm
but I
just
do,
going by what I think I remember us talking about.
I do have the breakdown of it at some point. If somebody would be interested in it, I could certainly provide it.
Regardless, it's a nice thing to do.
Fund 16. So Fund 16 is the White River wastewater. So it goes with Fund 50, Fund 50, Fund 60. Fund 50 was the water piece of it that we talked about. So in 2021, the budgeted amount was $1,849,966. The amount of the expenses were $1,192,794. They utilized 64% of their budget versus in 2020, they utilized 80% of their budget. For revenue, in 2021, they had 1,893,236. For their budget, the actual was 1,617,999.85. So they had a collection of 85% versus in 2020, they had 92%.
Sure.
Yes.
Gil, I don't mean to slide back, but I'm going to ask, I just noticed this, and I noticed it before, I didn't ask. Under Fund 55, the connections, 124%, 144%. I mean, what's that all about?
So for connections, could be new development, meaning new houses. Could be, we had individuals and or buildings that were on the system, but we didn't know they were on the system, and now we know they're on the system. So it has to do with connections. They're all new connections. Could be, so it's from development or redoing, could be from vacant buildings that are now online. It's very, very difficult. That's a revenue line item. It's very difficult to budget for because you don't ever know what you're going to have for development or what's going to go online and what's going to go offline.
We also charge according to the size of the connection. So, that's really up to the people who offer up the connection is how big of a connection they want. We charge accordingly.
Good. It's a unique profit.
So we're going to talk about Fund 65, and then I will answer any questions that. I'm sorry, there's so much stuff on there. I don't know how to make it go away. So Fund 65 is the Quechee wastewater. So as we talked about, White River's got water and wastewater, Quechee's got water and wastewater. So Fund 65 for 2021, they budgeted expenses. They budgeted for $1,389,520. The actual expenses were $1,032,791. They utilized 74% of their budget. In 2020, they utilized 46% of their budget. And for revenue for 2021, they had budgeted $1,386,139. The actual revenue for collection, $1,172,809 for 85%. Versus in 2020, we had 86%. Questions on Fund 65 or any other funds that I may have not answered for you?
Looks good. Thank you.
See the same thing as connections down there. Which, I understand that from last one. So
Okay. So just for closing out, Lanny, I'll have the fire chief follow up with you on the trend for the ambulance write-offs. And then I think I skipped over the revenue piece. So I will send that to you, for the taxes, we can calculate the percentage of the delinquent piece.
please, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so. I guess I need your help, Tracy, because I kind of landed up there. So I don't know what's going on. I was trying to get it, but it kept going by it.
Being very, very slow today. I don't, unless you have a PowerPoint, we can just talk. But
Yeah, I don't really have to.
there we are. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like your computer is angry.
But it changes every week.
Randomly generated.
You want to
codes.
just talk?
I think that I
They change
need
it every week now,
attachments.
so it won't be the same. next
Are
week.
you all okay?
And they're in the packet, so even people at home can.
Like come in and.
Look at
Yeah.
theirs.
Bathroom.
Let's go with that for sake of.
Okay, so the next item, 5B, I was asked as the finance director to come and speak about municipal leasing overview. I'm here to talk about municipal leasing as the finance director. And in your packet, I provided some information about putting money away into reserves, what it would look like and what we'd earn for interest. And I gave three different scenarios. If we, we're looking for 50,000, 250,000, $1 million. Just so everybody would see what we would collect for interest. Again, that takes the town making the decision to make those reserve deposits annually. If they don't make the deposits annually, you're not going to meet your capital plan. What are some benefits from municipal tax exempt leasing? The interest rates are extremely low. They also include a non-appropriation clause. A non-appropriation clause means if the budget does not pass by the board and the voters, that the town has the opportunity to get out of the lease. It's very important that every lease that we have has that in there because every year the voters approve a budget. At the end of the lease, the town does own the asset, which is a little bit different than other leases. Some leases, you have to turn the equipment in or you have to pay additional funding to buy it out. These lease payments that we make, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, at the end of it, we own it. Leasing fills very important voids. And I say this as an example for the fire truck. The fire truck, the ladder truck, failed. There was not sufficient funding in the reserve account. The municipal leasing fit in perfectly. We were able to fill that void, get a critical piece of equipment, not wait until town meeting, until we went through the whole budget cycle. So leasing does work to fill those critical voids. Because no matter how much you plan, whether you choose to do pay as you go with a reserve deposits or you do bonding, it's inevitable. You're going to have a piece of either equipment or a piece of infrastructure that is going to fail, and you can't plan for that. Another benefit for municipal tax exempt leasing is that it allows you to have multiple assets replaced at one time at a lower amount. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit, but it does allow for multiple assets, again, whether it's a piece of equipment or if we're talking about infrastructure, that does allow you to do it at a very low rate and again, in an emergency situation. Challenges with municipal leasing. And again, this is my opinion as the finance director. The challenges that we have with municipal leasing currently is the town has a very inconsistent capital plan. We as a town need to do better. And when we're talking about the capital plan, we need to understand that a project needs to stay on there once the project's funded, it doesn't go away. And I think that's an education, it's a education curve for everybody. And we just need to keep that in mind. Again, Tracy and I have talked about this for the budgeting part of it and for capital planning. And again, just because it's funded doesn't mean it goes away. Once it gets paid for, it goes away. And then you can move from there. Again, multiple year projects, they need to stay on the capital plan. And it makes it difficult because when you're doing the leasing, sometimes that gets forgotten. And then it comes up again when we're doing the budget. Another challenge that we have for leasing, every time that we have a change in the board, every time we have a change with the town manager, we have different directions that we're given. Do we want to save? Is it cheaper to save or is it cheaper to take debt out? Again, we need to do better and we need to understand when we put the capital plan together, we've made a decision that we're going to be committed to funding a project. And it may be that we're funding that project by a leasing mechanism, and it may be, but it's by a debt, by a bond, or by funding. But that it's a challenge that we have. Not utilizing leasing when we don't have the funding available in reserves. It has a negative impact on our assets that we have, whether it's equipment or if it's infrastructure. It has negative impact because then we're having deferred maintenance. We need to do better in making sure that we're having that maintenance and making sure that we have a schedule out there and when things are ready to be replaced. That's challenging enough. And then you throw in if something breaks in the meantime. So the last piece I'll talk about with the challenging, I already mentioned the ladder truck. The other part is, most recently we talked about DPW leasing 2 vehicles. That was, the decision was made when the 22 budget was put together and was approved. We're going to lease those vehicles. That's what we're going to do. Now we have a new board, different points of view. Is there a different funding structure? It makes it very challenging for staff when we have the budget in front of us, and that's what we're planning on doing. So again, this is my opinion as a finance director and what I see in having the conversations. So asset replacement, leasing will continue to be the best fiscally responsible decision until a consistent capital plan can be put into place. And again, that's due to because we do have low reserves because it's changed over the past few years. We've taken out, we're not going to fund the fire reserve. We're not going to fund that anymore, or we're going to fund it at a lower amount. So until we can get a better consistent plan in place, leasing will have to be an option that we have to continue to explore. I did have Ashley from the bond bank come. I work with her on a regular basis and talk about our debt and our ceiling and where we're at. And is it fiscally responsible to bond? Is it fiscally responsible to lease? And just to recap really quickly, as she talked about, the bond bank has extremely low interest rates. We could jump on board. Let's get our capital plan in place. We know that we're going to need to be replacing certain things. We have a strong capital plan. Let's put it in the budget, go to the voters and get on that. You can, again, similar with leasing, you can replace multiple equipment. You can replace your infrastructure if you know and you have it planned out. Let's utilize it. And again, I think I talked about it before and Ashley reiterated it, it's intergenerational equity. We shouldn't be having everybody who lives here now and in the next 5 years pay for everything. We need to make sure that it's spread out and make sure that it's equitable and not putting that huge burden on our residents every time that we pass the budget. I think again, and it goes back to, we need to have a solid capital plan. And If we have a solid capital plan, we can go back to leasing in those emergency situations. And we can put the money in the bank or we can earn the interest, but we just need to be better at what we're doing. And then the last piece was the bonding part of it. Using a line of credit, which we have, we can utilize that line of credit if something was to come up and we can pay that expense and then we can go back and get a bond and we can pay that back if we needed to. If something major came up, you never know if we're gonna have a major system failure. We can do that. Utilizing your reserve to pay for those system failures or utilizing your reserve to pay for equipment failure, that's not allowable to be reimbursed by the bond. So keep that in mind. That's what I have to say about municipal leasing. I'm certainly welcome any questions that you may have. And I know that it's a challenging topic. And again, it's my opinion professionally that I would say.
Any, go ahead.
So you spoke of many times in your presentation, Gail, of a consistent capital plan. Can you explain to the board what you consider to be a consistent, aggressive capital plan, a solid capital plan that would allow us to bond instead of lease? The numbers you're looking for would be what?
So I wouldn't say it has to be an aggressive capital plan. It needs to be a realistic capital plan. Right now, we're playing catch up from a few years of deferred maintenance and things that have not been taken care of that they should have been taken care of. Every year, department heads are requested to provide information regarding their needs. And it could be anything from their equipment. We know every 10 years, we're going to need to replace something. Or every 5 years, we're going to need to replace something. Each one of the department heads have fantastic schedules that they keep track of all of that. Every year they provide that schedule. They provide it to the town manager. And we still don't have a consistent capital plan. So my recommendation would be, this year is a new year. We have the opportunity to turn over a new leaf. The department heads do the work. They're boots on the ground. They know what we need to have. And we know that we still have a lot of work to do, but they're boots on the ground. They know when things are starting to fail, whether it's equipment, if it's infrastructure, it's the sidewalks, the roads, everything. We provide all that information to the town manager. The town manager brings it to you. It's you as the board that have to determine what your priorities are. And next year, when it comes around, if 3 of you or 2 of you are not sitting here, you can't change that list. You may have 5 things. Pick 5 things of the 25 that you're given. So you have 5 things. It may take 5 years to achieve them. But next year, when we write the budget, if you're not all sitting here and you have a change, there's a change in the value of where you want to prioritize. You can't drop 3 of those things off the list. We're not getting anywhere. So that's my recommendation is choose the 5 or choose 10, whatever it may be, depending on the size of them. Be consistent. And again, it doesn't drop off the list until it's paid for, because every year you need to still have the funding to pay for it.
But I'm not quite sure I completely understand that. I know that it's a 2-way street, or in this case, it's a 3-way street. The department heads, the town manager, and the select board. But in the past, I'm not going to say there's a failure, but in the past, where has it been lagging for us not to reach these solid capital plan? Where do you see the lack? Do you see that in the department heads not doing their as diligent a job as they could? Do you see the town manager not doing, a good job of projections? Is the select board failing to provide enough capital? Where do we need to do better as a board? Where do department heads need to do better as department heads? And where does the town manager need to do better? Or is it a combination? Everybody's got to do their job better.
As I stated, we as a town need to do better. I'm not going to finger point where I think that there could be a weakest link. I'm just stating that we provide the information, the department heads provide the information, we're giving it to the town manager, and then the town manager presents it to the board. And there's a disconnect along the way, and we need to fix it. We need to do better as a town. This is our opportunity to do better.
I guess that's what I'm looking for, is where is the broken chain?
Yeah.
I often think of capital improvement plans as an inheritance, right? We're going to set a capital improvement plan for 5 years for the future boards. And those kind of things need to be done thoughtfully. They need to be costed appropriately. So, understanding also what inflation looks like. And then you give that gift to future boards and say, we have decided that these are the most important things. And we have decided that we will be doing this work going forward. Now, there's a few different places that can go wrong. Any one of us can cost inappropriately, or we can have unintended consequences. We didn't anticipate construction costs moving the way that they did during COVID. The industry standard is, I think, 5%. We saw huge jumps in many of the construction facilities. That could be something that any municipality could be dealing with. They didn't anticipate a concrete shortage. They didn't anticipate a plastics shortage. But all of these are long-term projects. And so once you decide to commit with something as a community, you have to see it through. To say, oops, never mind, what can we do next? You're going to end up with a lot of half-finished sewing projects, so to speak.
Kim, go ahead.
Well, I think as we discussed before, we terribly overthought the prioritization process at one point, and because it seemed so intangible and it seemed so I have great hopes and expectations that Tracy's going to help us process the way that we come up with these priorities. And I think that we've always been presented with the capital plan as if like, oh, well, this has been funded, but it hasn't been paid for, so it's off the list, So and I spent time researching what other regional cities and towns do to develop their capital plans. Claremont, New Hampshire has just like a checklist of things that kind of helps them figure out where to choose their priorities. But I think it's harder than it sounds. I mean, even as an individual, forget as a body, to look at this seemingly insurmountable list of very expensive projects during a time when labor is hard to come by, materials are so expensive. Anyway, I guess, and when I came on the board a few years ago, was kind of presented with this list that seemed like it had been just around for a while. So anyway, I'm hoping that, Tracy, that you'll help us to do a better job.
I think too, there's two things that I came away with there. Is one is that we do need to remain cognizant of our labor and material shortages, and we can anticipate that those are going to continue for the foreseeable future. I know many of you on the board are trying to hire. I'm trying to hire. My department directors are hiring, and we know that there's a labor shortage. We also know that there's a material shortage. We still have a global pandemic going on in many of the places that produce the materials that many of us take for granted. Everything from chips to culverts. We can't get vehicles because we can't get chips to build the vehicles because we still have a global pandemic. So I want to bring that practicality back and say what's actually doable over the next 5 years, knowing that. Another thing that you all have heard me talk about is that, we're not alone in this. We have the state, we have the Regional Planning Commission, they're doing their own things. And sometimes we need to be able to coordinate in terms of our residents' capacity to be disrupted through construction, to be disrupted through capital projects, because they are of their nature disruptive. We don't think about it when we tie a bow on a beautiful new building, but we've displaced staff for so long, looking at this building. And it's being practical, and knowing that there are going to be hard decisions, and there are things that need to get done that, maybe can't get done, or maybe can't get done in the timeline that we wish they could be done if we had all the time, money, energy, and staff in the world. And that's hard, but I think every progress begins with one step and just being really practical about what capacity we have.
When will we be working on it?
Definitely. So traditionally, the capital plan came to the board in about January of each year. That didn't happen in January 2021 because there was a part-time interim. I was not yet technically on the payroll. We're going into budget and we're going into winter. And so to ask staff to also take on an off-cycle capital improvement plan seems disingenuous to the work that we want them to continue to do. So I think when we talked a little bit ago, my plan of action for that was to just ask them to lightly update anything that they thought was really kind of off. It hadn't been costed appropriately in the past, or the priorities had changed due to changing infrastructure, and then really dig into a full capital improvement plan starting in January 2022 on the regular cycle. So instead of asking them to kind of push out on this last 4 months, say, okay, we missed 2021. Lots of things outside of our control. Let's go back in and dive in 2022.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question for Gail about the leasing, just in general. What type of property are we generally leasing? Is it like trucks, equipment, things like that? Or just run the gamut?
It could be a truck, it could be a Zamboni,
Yep.
it could be a mower. We really utilize the tax exempt municipal leasing as much as we can for, again, for this, I call them smaller items. They're less than $200,000. They're sometimes things break, but we have been utilizing them. They've been great.
And how much money we're committed to in leasing currently?
I don't think I have the leasing schedule
Okay.
in front of me. And I should know it because I just finished it for the audit too. I'm a little bit
It sounds like
embarrassed.
leasing would also be a tool we consider when we have it.
That is correct. Yes.
Thanks.
Bill, Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you. Early in the presentation, did I hear that the fire is going away from reserve accounts? Or was that just an example that what could happen?
I was using that as an example.
Oh.
So the ladder truck that failed.
Yeah.
Due to previous budgets that had been approved, did not include adequate funding to that reserve account, which did not allow for the equipment to be purchased. Therefore, we had to lease it.
Yeah, I understand all that part.
Just to clarify that though, to make sure I'm understanding you, it wasn't funded up because it broke before we expected to replace it, right?
It broke a couple of years before we had anticipated it being replaced. However, there was still not.
It was underfunded.
Correct. So I don't remember the exact amount, but I believe that the fire reserve only received about 80,000 in 2021. And I think for 2022 for their reserve deposit versus a couple $100,000. And Fire Chief Cooney, Fire Chief Cooney has it scheduled out. He knows when his equipment needs to be replaced. And normally we replace ambulances, we'll pay for them in full. And so in this particular case, because previous budgets did not include sufficient funding, we may have been only short 200,000, we could have been short 2 years versus there was not adequate funding whatsoever.
Well, part of that is that we bought a bigger truck also, right? It was a longer ladder and so on. Went from 75 foot to 100 foot, and it was a bigger truck.
I certainly do agree that the type of equipment is different, but it does not change the deficit that the reserve account was carrying because deposits had not been made in there to meet the need. Even the basic need, had they gone with the regular simple replacement, there still was not sufficient funding to replace it.
Thank you for that. So I have admired how the fire department overall does great planning and and pays through reserves for most of their stuff. I mean, it just seems in recent times that some other departments haven't done that. And I just don't know why it works so well for them and not others. So I'm always puzzled by that.
So each department does do the same thing that the fire department does. However, again, there's a disconnect from all of the work that department heads do. From when they do the work, it goes to the town manager and then it goes to the board. And it is very unfortunate because everybody does the same amount of work and for some reason it just stops and it doesn't happen. So I just would like to reiterate that each one of them do the work. It just, there's a disconnect that it stops.
I have done a number of fleet replacement performance audits in my tenure in California, and I have to say I'm incredibly impressed with the fleet replacement schedules that each department holds and maintains. They're very lovely and they're very thoughtful and they're clean, easy to understand, and yet practical. And it's pretty impressive.
So I've been more of an advocate for paying through reserves and paying cash than doing the leasing or bonds and whatnot. But one thing that I think was mentioned earlier in a previous meeting is, I guess it was with bonds, is how sometimes they're forgiven after you have them. And I don't know how you can plan for such a thing, but I mean, that's really good if we can take a loan or I guess it was bonds that this came with. How do you plan for, say, if we buy $1 million whatever and suddenly it's forgiven? Maybe we should do that with everything in hopes that it will be forgiven.
So for regular bonds, I believe that Ashley gave you an explanation. It doesn't happen all the time, but we have 3, I believe, that have been rewritten with lower amounts, which is great. The revolving water fund through the state of Vermont, they have multiple programs where they do 50% forgiveness. So, and I believe I think Lori will be on in a little while to talk about one of those programs. So those are great programs that the town should be utilizing. When you're doing your capital plan, let's jump on board. You can get $3-4 million worth of infrastructure taken care of and only have to pay back 2 million, pay back 2 million of it. So those are, again, it goes back to the strong capital plan and the planning
And just one last thing. Kim sort of alluded to this earlier, I think. At least the last budget I was involved in, we ended up with a wish list, my words, of, we'd like to buy, we've got these 20 projects. We had a rough price tag on them and then we figured out how much money we actually had and then we prioritized from there. And so I'm hoping when we go into this, we'll end up with, some sort of something like that. So we can make decisions.
I think that would be great if you could do that. There is some major infrastructure and or equipment that really could be replaced or timely be replaced. And again, utilizing bonds, you can lump them all together. It can be based on the use, the useful life. There's many different pieces. So I think when you first look at it, it can be very overwhelming. It's a big ticket thing, but if you have items that that are going to be failing very soon, this is your opportunity. Don't be shell shocked by the sticker shock, I guess is what it's called. Don't be sticker shock because it is in the long run. If we as a town don't start making changes, we're going to have significant infrastructure failure that we don't need, or more deferred equipment is going to start dropping off. And we want to make sure that the roads get plowed. We want to make sure that we can get those sidewalks. Sidewalks is a huge one that kind of been pushed along. And if you would like to, but it scares it's a scary situation because it's a very big price tag to do your sidewalks, but we know that they need to be done. So get your capital plan together, decide which ones you want to do, get it out there, get a bond.
It would be good to have a red, yellow, green sort of on the list, on what I'm calling a wish list. Because I think we've heard for some time now that, for instance, the salt shed in DPW needs to be replaced. And so if that's in the red, there's some projects we really don't have a choice. We have to do that. And so it would be good to know, which ones we just have to do. Like for instance, a couple of years ago, we had the new lights down at Maxfield because we were in violation of Title IX. We didn't really have a choice on that. We had to do it or face possible penalties. And so it was the right thing to do. So we put that to the top of the list because we had to do it. So that's more like what would be helpful to me is that type of list with, well, just simply red, yellow, green. Green is like maybe on the green side of it, and yellow's caution, and red, we have to do it.
Well, I would hope that nobody would be putting anything in front of you that would be a dream or wish list item. When the capital plan is put together, it should be at what is needed. And it should be set out, you have 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. Those should be your priorities for those years that you're working on. They are needed items, they're not wish items.
Well,
We have a swimming pool.
there's,
Sorry, I'm just
when
saying.
it comes, this is where I'm sitting, I guess, if it came down to building some new sidewalk somewhere, a brand new one that's not currently, that we don't have, versus repairing ones that are crumbling, I'm probably gonna go on the side of fix the crumbling ones first before we can build new ones. So that's more where I'm coming from for that. That would be more in the dream or wish part, not mandatory.
Absolutely. And so with your solid capital plan that you have, that each department head will be providing, again, it'll be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years. So we're on year 22. You're going to look at every department. What do they have in year 22? What is it that they need?
Yeah.
And has the need changed from when the capital plan? So the need is very different from board view and community view. It's the need of it. So it could be that the need changed, it broke sooner rather than later, so we had to replace it. Or we have a funding mechanism that came in that allows you not to burden the residents with it. So those are different pieces. But again, I can't imagine that any department head would be providing or should, or the board should consider anything that's on a wish list. It should be items that are needed.
I think what you could see, Dennis, is something where the useful life is really far out there. So if we buy something like a motor grader and we say, okay, we're buying it in 2020 and the useful life for this motor grader is anticipated to be 20 years, 2040, right, is the end of its useful life. This is when we need to replace. 2035 could be when we start saying, okay, have we had some unanticipated repairs? Is that repair cost indicating that it might be time to shorten the useful life of this piece of equipment? Was there some sort of state grant that somebody looked up and said, oh, they're giving away free motor graders in 2032? You know what? The motor grader is not slated for repair, but let's look at that. Let's move this money around. So that's kind of where good planning goes, is every time we do something, we repair, we say, okay, sidewalks, we repair every 5 years. Okay, we repair in 2020. We anticipate in 2025, we're going to need X % of dollars to do that repair work. And we just kind of continue down this really long Excel spreadsheet until the end of time.
Other questions?
Maybe a comment. I understand that there are must-haves that come before the board for budgeting time every year. I just wonder, and I've stated this before, if we're leaving out the voice of the citizen when it comes to budgeting. Because the voice of the citizen, I mean, I know we're all elected up here by the citizens to represent them. However, I personally would love to see something go out for a survey to understand where the citizens place the most value in this town. Because if the citizens don't place the same amount of value as this board does on public safety, I mean, public safety is, we got to educate first off, we have to educate the public about how important public safety is. But the other thing is like Parks and Rec or budgets for other things. I think it's really important that we collect that information, the voice of the citizen, to help us do a better job of where to drive the budgets. Because they're the ones that are electing us and they're the ones that utilize our services. So it's the only way, in my opinion, that you can drive change effectively is to have a survey and then follow up with that survey in another, say, 5 years to see if the results of that have improved and if you're making the right choices or not. And we have not been doing that. This town is taking the voices of 7 people on this board to drive the budget for 10,000 plus citizens that are out there. And you may have 20% or not even 20, 9% that care about this one little segment of what our budget is, right? Knowing that we have to supply services, how important is that 9% versus everyone else is, saying that we're not as concerned about that aspect. We need to focus on these things instead. And that's where I really would love to be able to collect the voice of the citizen to know where to go with our budgeting process. And we just have not done that. We did a survey a long time ago, but it was a funky, foolish survey. And unless you consistently do surveys, you have no way of knowing whether you're adapting to what the citizens want you to adapt to.
Thank you.
I think that is something to consider proposing to go into the budget cycle for 23. Like it's not doing a survey like that is actually effective and actually reaches the number of people, requires staff time. It requires unless you're going to do sort of a not professional version of it, like it's something that is not funded, does not have staff to produce it, to provide it. I mean, even when the pool committee did a really excellent job and gave a lot of excellent responses on just the pool survey, it still was not, was not representative of, it did not reach every Hartford resident. Every Hartford resident did not respond. It's a bigger project than just having the idea of it. And I do think what would be wonderful in the meantime is to be sure to engage and ask community members to come to board meetings when we are discussing the budget for those topics. When the town clerk's office comes to discuss their budget, when Scott comes to discuss the Parks and Rec budget, people have interest in the influencing the decisions about how that budget gets made, can come like you have and do public comment and share what's important to them. And you could be one person or you could be 75 people in here. We have Zoom now, we have hybrid meetings. We could have, 200 people in our meetings, but I don't think we have the means to do an accurate, effective survey for this year.
No, certainly not this year. No, I agree. It would not happen this year. But I do believe it's something that we need to do. And this is a firm role, like where Six Sigma comes in. You have to be able to track things about your citizens.
We're about to discuss encumbering the funds for the marketing and promotion of the town because there hasn't been the capacity, is my guess, of why it hasn't been, we don't have a town marketing plan or a PR plan, and the money keeps getting pushed to the further year. So I think it's something you could request when we get to that appropriate part of the budget to put it in for.
We don't know where we're failing the citizens until we collect the data from the citizens. Or if we are failing citizens, we're exceeding the aspects of citizens without collecting that information.
Well, I'll leave it there and just say the election is part of that, that people voting for the representatives so that they don't have to formulate a budget is part of what we're doing here. So we need to serve them right and do the best we can.
And we have meetings every other week, and they can reach out to the town manager, they can reach out to us, we've got emails. We've got a lot of different ways for people to do that. And as Kim said, it's a nice idea, but it's gonna cost some money. So I don't think it's something that we want to put off the table, but I think we need to be, looking at the pool, as someone mentioned, that they did an excellent job with their survey, but it really didn't reach many people. So all year long, anytime people can come to us and comment to us, but there are things like Dennis said that we have to do, that we have to be up to code, that are out of our control. And sometimes when those things that we have to meet so that we're up to code, take all the money in the budget, we can't do the extra things or the things that would be nice, like, so those things get kicked down the road because there's only so much money in this budget unless we want to increase taxes so much that no one can afford to live here, which is already sort of by default happening. So we need to weigh all those factors, and what's really important to this person may not be really important to this person. So we have to figure out how, as Tracy and Gail said, getting a capital plan in place that looks more long-term than what has happened. We need to make sure that as members of this board change, that is carried forward to them in a very concrete way, a document that they can see and say, this is on the table, it's not paid for, so don't put something else in this place because you've already allotted that money for this. We need to think about all those factors. And with the lack of staffing that we've had and the lack of a consistent town manager, I think we're now moving in that right direction. But I mean, I think everyone is partly to blame and no one's to blame for that because there've been so many changes with the supply chain, with staffing, et cetera, with COVID. So I think having this conversation is very important, and I think it will help us move forward in a way where we can take all those different factors, your survey, your comments, Kim's comments, the residents' comments, staff, and the town manager, and somehow bring that together where we can be on a better page to move forward, which we haven't done very successfully in the past. So I think that's good.
I just see that, like, as Gail has stated, every year you have a change in this board, or you have the potential to have a change in this board. Whereas if we do surveys of our citizens and have our citizens drive our budgets, you're not gonna have a change in citizens every 5 years. You're gonna have more citizens. You may have people moving out, people moving out, people moving in, but I don't think you would see that big of changes. That a survey would not capture what the voice of the citizen is going to be, because the voice of the citizen is how you drive the change that you want your town to be, not the 7 different people that are sitting up here that have different ideas on what needs to be done. The people out there that we represent, that 5-year plan is the one that we should be going to, not our 5-year plan.
I think it's a discussion for later. I think we'll just leave it at that because we're getting off task. So I think we need to focus back on our next thing, which is, I think, Gail again with encumbrance request.
Gail did ask to be stacked back to back to back. So I want to let you guys know this
That's
was, I gave her a preference and asked her if she wanted a break, and she said no, she's got stamina. So
I know each of you just love hearing my voice. That's why I got so the last item that we have is 5C. This is an annual occurrence that happens. We actually do it for technical reasons only for our audit. It's pretty much the only reason why it's needed. But it's a great exercise, and it lets all of you know, the board and lets the voters know what we have going on. So at the end of 2021, we need to encumber some funds, and encumbering funds consist of projects that are in motion. Some of these projects may have already closed by now because we're in August. Budgeted items that were delayed for whatever reason. It could be, a shortage, timing wise, et cetera, So provided a summary page which shows you what was previously approved in the prior years. And that number was substantially higher last year, but we've drawn down on it as projects are getting executed. And then so for this year, for 2021, we still have the same categories that are listed for advertising, materials and supplies, contracted services, department equipment, uniforms, etc. Excuse me. So for like marketing promotion, we know that Tracy took the horns and she's running with the new website that we have going on. So that's part of a project that we had to encumber some funds for because the project's not complete yet. Another piece would be, I'm only going to give you a couple examples just for the new board members. Another example would be the contract that we have with HCRS. So we encumbered those funds. So that contract's paid for. So we knew that we engaged in the contract, we knew we were gonna have a fee for it. So rather than take it out of the 22 budget, it should have come out of the 21 budget. And then the last piece that I wanted to mention, the Fairview Terrace. So we originally had $30,000 in there. And I know this is a bigger discussion, so I'm just stating the facts. So we did have 30,000 in there. We were able to put it up to $100,000. So we're encumbering $100,000 for Fairview Terrace for whatever may happen going forward. So those are just a couple of examples of it. So what I'm requesting tonight is I do need a board motion approving the encumbrances as they're presented.
Would someone like to make a motion? Are there any questions? Kim, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I move that the select board approve the 2021 encumbrance request for items and projects previously approved in operating budgets, as well as additional COVID expenses.
Second by Dennis. Any further questions or comments?
Yes. So it's probably going to come out and not be a very smart question, but what does it mean when we say we're encumbering all this money, that we're doing it? Are we giving it back to the departments? Or are we going to just utilize it to put forward towards the budget? I
So
guess.
an example, again, the HCRS contract, we've engaged in a contract with the HCRS. We know that we need to pay them.
Right.
We have the money in the 21 budget. We want that expense to be paid from the 21 budget. We would not want to carry that burden into 2022, that there is money in that budget, or if they choose to go a different route with the wellness coordinator. So that would just be an example of that. Another example is marketing. Tracy is contracted with a firm to do our website design. So we had to pay half of it up front, and then we pay the rest of it when the contract is completed. So that shouldn't be a 22 expense, because we know that the project started in 21. So that money stays with those departments to finish the projects that they've started or have been delayed. Again, a lot of this has already been paid out. You've already seen it through the manifests that have come through. But it's a picture on 6/30, this is what we had.
Of that $1,356,204.99, how much of that would be left over after things that have already been slated for would be left over? If anything?
They should be zero.
Zero, okay,
We're not encumbering funds that we don't have a use for.
okay. All right. That answers my question to a T.
Right, so for previous years approved, some of these go back to 2017. They're multi-year projects.
Okay, good.
So until the project is complete, they'll still be on here. So anything that's not completed when we come to 2022 and we do this exercise again, they're going to be pushed over into that other column.
All right, now I understand. Sorry.
No, not a problem at all. But again, the majority of them, they've already come through on the payment manifest. They just, it's a snapshot of where we were at 6/30.
Completely understand when you say that now, that'll go away. I understand that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciate it.
Danny, good question. And on the, in the packet, the encumbrance request, if you look at the financial impact, there's a really good sort of summary right there that will help you, I think, understand it.
What is that? What page is that on? Do you know?
I don't know what page it is.
PDF, page 36.
Thank you.
This.
Okay, so any other questions? We have a motion and a second. Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So it's unanimous. Thank you. Great. Okay, let's have Lori do her presentation, then we'll take a little break. How's that?
Lori had to go home for a family issue, but thankfully due to technology, we are able to have her live from her house. CATV, if you could bring Lori over so she can be on the big screen.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for accommodating me. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hopefully we can get through this fairly quickly. I know it's been a long evening, and Gail gave you some really great information and sort of gave you a little lead into the presentation for this evening. What I want to discuss with you is just kind of next step in our final design for the South Main, North Main, and Gate Street projects. And that's a TIF project. We are completed phase 1 over 2 construction seasons. And we have the final design and engineering completed principally for this next project that is what is before you. So earlier in the year, you actually approved for making application to the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. And this is one of those that will have a 50% loan forgiveness once we complete the project. So that's the total cost is $31,700. And what you have before you now is to execute the loan documents. Pretty straightforward items. There are 3 components to this, the execution of the loan grants. The first one is the loan agreement, and all of these are attachments within the documents that you received for this meeting. So the first one is the loan agreement. That requires select board action on the particular agreement and for the select board chair to actually sign it. The second one is Exhibit C, which is a general obligation note. The details of the actual note are on there. It's a 5-year note. It's 0% interest rate and 0% processing application fees for that. And that does take select board action as well as signatures from all of the select board members present this evening. And then the third document is the Exhibit D, which is the resolution and certification. Again, this takes select board action and signatures from all members of the select board that are present this evening. So just as I mentioned before, your fiscal impact is 0% for your admin fee and your interest rate at current. Once everything gets actually executed in the formal manner, whatever's on the books at that time, but that's what was given to us a couple of weeks back when we received these documents for execution. The loan for forgiveness would be reducing the loan in half, and so the payback will only be $15,850. And then the final thing is that TIF dollars will be used to cover the cost of the loan payments. So what I'm recommending to you at this point is for you to review the documents, and if you have any questions, certainly ask them, and hopefully I will be able to address those. And then finally, to take action on all of those documents, and then to designate the town manager, which is Tracy Darlot, and have her act as the principal representative for the town, and then appoint Dan Fraser as our select board chair as the alternate authorized signature as well. Any questions? And once you are done with your actions, Paula does have a set of documents for you to circulate for you to sign this evening.
Great, thanks, Lori. Any questions for Lori? Oh, Dennis and then Kim.
No, I just.
Oh,
Kim's
sorry.
hand.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Lori, can you hear me?
Yes.
Does this final design process that this loan covers for phase 2 potentially allow for some of the more green space on the restaurant side of the street on South Main Street?
So those are things that I'm going to leave up to Public Works. I mean, we are looking at it right now, but I will tell you that the green space on that side would significantly alter the plans that have already been completed, and we'd have to totally redo it. What I don't know that you may be familiar with is that this does work in conjunction with the improvements for the town square parking lot, which is on the opposite side of the street. And the plans for that is to flip the parking spaces that are perpendicular right now into the parking lot area, but move the green space adjacent to the street. And so we will have our green space there, but it will be integrated with a parking lot redesign and reconstruction. And in that way, we will be able to put an adequate sidewalk on that side of the street, which has not had one for the last 30 years, except one that's been cut by individuals walking through it, and will really bring back that sense of green space and the town square. Whether or not we can accommodate having the on-street capacity currently that we're doing for restaurants, I'm going to leave that up to Tracy to talk a little bit more about. That is being looked at, but I don't know that we have come to a final conclusion at this point as to how we can accommodate that on an annual basis.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you. Other questions?
Well, I just want to follow up that with Tracy, I guess, if I may.
Yeah.
That, like, I don't want that window of opportunity to close. Like, if we're going to pay another $30,000 for final engineering and design, seems like that might be a time where if we're not too late,
So-
So, I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is
So
we're talking
Carrie,
about that.
I'm sorry.
We're talking about the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. So we're talking about that underneath infrastructure. Now that is going to have an ability on what we can put on top, right? If we have infrastructure underneath, in terms of green space against that building side where we have our restaurants, that's something that I just, with ADA compliance, sidewalking, needing those parking spaces, hydrants, really the best course of action to make that whole space look beautiful is that side that Lori is talking about. In terms of, when I hear green space, I'm thinking lawn, and maybe you and I are having a disconnect.
yeah.
Having green space in terms of lawn on the side against the buildings.
I guess I'm more interested in pedestrian space, more usable space on the building side, so that what we've experienced during COVID and what we've learned about expanded outdoor dining, that we can carry some version of that forward.
Chris Halsworth, who is one of our public works employees, an amazing engineer, probably knows more about what's under these streets than any of us could ever hope to imagine, is looking at how we can kind of create a community feel within all the variety of constraints that we have in terms of providing ramps and hydrants and accessibility, and how many parking spaces each one of those options will require us to give up. So that's still on the table. It just in terms of when we say green space, thinking about like lawns and trees.
I guess I should refer to it as pedestrian human space, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm a little like, Kim, I don't think we can put a lawn up against Tucker Box and
No,
Piecemeal. So
more usable space, I guess.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think that is kind of the modern movement towards downtowns, is to offer kind of a little bit more of that feel as you turn that corner.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I think what you're talking about is what we might more traditionally term as streetscape improvements that really allow for that feel. And but we are I just want to make it clear that we really are putting green back into the areas close to it. It's just going to be more attached to the parking lot, the literally green, grass and all of that, so that there is that sense of connection between the street and people enjoying the pedestrian feel of the area.
Thanks, Lori.
Thanks, Lori. Lanny, go ahead.
Yeah, Lori, question, this is going to be, this actual work is going to be done next year because it was decided that there wasn't, I'm not sure exactly what the term for it, wasn't everything put together to happen this year. So does this $31,700, does that include any cost overruns due to material prices increasing, labor increasing? How does that work if we have overruns due to material cost and labor costs?
So what
we
you
gonna
see
cover that?
before you, actually is the engineering and design cost. It's not the construction cost. We will be coming back to the board for the actual financing process. We've already been approved for construction. That's a separate bond that was actually approved in 2019 and 2020 for the various different projects, 2020 for the parking lot and 2019. What we haven't done is we haven't actually pulled the bond for all of those funds, as well as the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund and the Potable Water Revolving Loan Fund, so the drinking water. So we'll be coming back to the board sometime in the next couple of months for you to approve applications for all of those. Now, again, we've had you as a body, and you personally not, but the select board as a body approved all of that in 2019 and 2020. And then the voters approved it as well because it's TIF. And so the bonding and the different financing mechanisms were identified at that time. Now we're actually putting together the applications to finish it. The first half of it was already approved. And so what you're seeing before you right now is just purely the engineering. And that is predominantly done.
I gotta ask you though, Lori, somehow this seems like we're putting the cart before the horse here, because you're asking for us for a $31,700 loan for the step 2 final design engineering bid process phase. But yet we've already got the money allocated for this project?
Yes, because it is something that, yep.
Yeah, but wait a minute, how can we allocate money for a fund that we haven't even have the complete engineering work
It's
done?
not
I just fail to understand that concept.
It's not an allocation of funds. It is approving a financing mechanism. So again, if you go back to the concept of what Gail was speaking about before in terms of capital improvement projects and where you make decisions about what capital improvements would be going forward at different stages. And once you set that in motion, then we go forward with actually applying for the specific funds and then executing those funds through a loan or, in this instance, it's a loan or a bond. And that's what the stage that we're at now. In 2019 and 2020, there were decisions made by the select board and the voters to go forward with these projects. Now what you have before you is the actual mechanisms for financing it that need to be executed. And previously you, as a board, approved putting the application in for the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. And now the documents are before you to execute. And the state requires that these go through a formal process with the select board in order to do that execution.
Thank you, Lori.
It boggles my mind how we can be asking for an engineering concept and then we're paying for it up ahead. We're paying ahead of time for it and asking for an engineering concept on it afterwards.
Okay.
I just like.
So what I'd like to clarify is we're not at the concept stage. We're at the final design. The concept stage was discussed in 2019 and actually in 2017 when we first started talking about the engineering and design of these projects. We are at the final stage of executing the documents for the final engineering and putting them out to bid. And that's the stage that we're at. And because we wanted to take advantage of the different loan funds that give us the loan forgiveness and the lower interest rates, we've broken it up into different stages of financing that engineering over several years. And the state does require that you do them by step. They don't do it all together at once.
Thanks, Lori. Just hopefully that answers some questions.
Clear as mud.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, we'll call the question. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, motion. Thank you. Back where we are. Would someone like to make a motion? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we review the attached documents, which are the loan agreement, Exhibit C, the general obligation note, and Exhibit D, the resolution and certification. And if acceptable, adopt them, sign them accordingly, and designate the town manager as the authorized representative and the select board chair as the alternate authorized representative for any other actions related to the loan as needed.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Kim. All in favor, or any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain, okay. So we have 6 in favor and one abstaining. Thank you. Okay, looking at the clock, it is 8:20. So why don't we take a 10-minute break and be back here at 8:30. in session now. So Tracy, when you're ready, you can tell us about the board budget guidance, please.
Yeah, so this is something that I inherited, a process that I inherited. Since 2016, the select board has provided a budget guidance document to the town manager at the beginning of the budget cycle that filters down into the department directors, of course. So, you know, the usual triage of it comes to me and then I facilitate with the department directors. And in previous years, the document has provided a set of overarching goals for the and I'm saying the operational budget cycle, right? Because we've had all these conversations about the CIP and about enterprise funds, but we're really talking about the operational budget cycle that we do every year. When I did some look into this, in previous years, the budget guidance had a lot of different stuff going on. It had some stuff that was doable in a year and really reflected the operational budgets that have been brought forth in the past. It also had long-term goals in there. Not to pick on one thing, but I saw one that basically said, you know, solve the parking problem in downtown White River Junction. And I thought, wow, in 12 months, that's a pretty ambitious goal to have and to put that on staff. And sometimes there were portions in the past that appeared to conflict with each other. So one of the things that I brought forth in my agenda item is that in previous years, the board has requested that the budget increase by no more than 3%, while also requesting significant increases in expenditures to reduce the town's carbon footprint or prioritize infrastructure. So it puts me and the staff in a little bit of a conundrum of having to fulfill many things that are often in conflict with each other. So, you know, construction materials have increased on average about 5% a year. So when we say to Public Works, we want a 3% increase, no more. But when construction materials have gone up by 5%, we're actually saying to them, we need you to take a 2% decrease, which doesn't necessarily allow them the opportunity to bring forth a budget that says, this is everything we need to get the work done. So that's kind of what I've brought forth today as I looked at it and I thought, I know we're all trying to do better. I know I'm new here, but these are some areas where I see we could really provide a doable budget guidance, one that is targeted towards a one-year operational budget of about $17 million. And also acknowledges all the things that you all have spoken about, both publicly and to me personally, when we've run into each other on the street is, oh, what about, or this would be really great, or where do you need support? Those things are all there. But it's hard for me when I look at the budget guidance of the previous years to see all of these different guidances, all of these different things that we want to do, but also feel really constrained by sometimes seeing that we want a net zero budget or only a 3% increase. I'm glad that Gail is here because she's been through this for me before in terms of the process, in terms of whether these folks chat about it right now and then come forth with a motion later is I think what you told me has happened in the past. So we begin this process by just letting you all kind of talk.
Thank you, Tracy.
So the goal is by the end of this month that budget guidance is provided to Tracy, who then would provide it to the department heads. So having the discussions and start your discussions now, and then as we go over the next few weeks, at the end of August, we need to have your budget guidance so we can start writing budgets.
And Gail and Tracy, can we pick on you a little bit in light of your presentations tonight and say, in light of the cost increase and all that, what would you see as a reasonable increase so that we can, you know, sort of start getting back on track with the capital planning and this? So, you know, so sleep on that and let us know, you know, send us some guidance, because like you said, the cost of things have gone up so much. It's not really fair to ask for only a 3% because that's really a 2% decrease, which we've done the department over and over. So we need some guidance from you as to how those numbers are going to play out. And also the justification for taxpayers, so they're understanding where this is coming from.
Definitely.
So different. So that'd be helpful.
And I think where I could find it really helpful, I think the department directors would find it really helpful, is hearing those kind of bigger picture goals. You know, what are kind of the bigger board appropriate things that you want them to emphasize. Where do you want them to put their time, effort, and money in? Because we know that all three of those things are limited.
Mike, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, just had a question. There's a document here, the strategic priorities of the Hartford Select Board from July 24, 2019. And it lists a whole bunch of things, and then it says rating after with a number. Do you know what that's about? Are those ranked in some kind of order of priority? Or I was just wondering what those might, does that reflect like the importance of each item?
I'm going to say I do my best digging through the documents of my predecessors. And sometimes I have to look to the members who were on the board before me and say, so what happened during that time period? So Kim might have some.
This was part of that overthinking of the prioritization. So a former board member developed a whole dynamic, complicated spreadsheet that literally like quantified things that were subjectively not quantifiable. But and then we were also trying to like delegate, like, well, who's responsible for taking this forward? Is it town manager? Is it the select board? And when will it be? And
It was confusing.
it was
Yeah.
and I don't think that there is no value in this, but I don't think that we need to use this as a primary document. I mean, I think it's useful for just historical priorities. I mean, in reading through the budget guidance memos, I mean, sure, there's some minor things that I would change, but generally speaking, I mean, it'd be interesting to know if you think, Tracy or Gail, if there are things that should just be struck from that entirely. But for example, increased parking capacity in White River Junction, I mean, that is happening with the expansion of the South Main Street lot. Like that was part of that plan, and that was that directive. Anyway, I guess like there's not a whole lot on here. There's some things that I think could be skipped, but generally speaking, like it would be interesting if one exercise we could do, whether it's tonight or not tonight, is just go down through that list and get a nodding of heads of like, do you still think this is sound budget guidance, or should we just get rid of it? Or what should we add? I mean, is that along the lines of what you're hoping to?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I took a look at the budget guidance too, and I've had to live it like some of you as well for the past few years, looking at it. So another conflicting, just to bring up another conflicting item would be previous boards have wanted to grow the unassigned fund. And our goal as a town is to make sure that we're putting together a zero-based budget. And I find it not very genuine to make that request to grow the unassigned fund. So that would be something that I would caution and appreciate and recommend that be removed from there, because we do want a zero-based budget. We want to be able to execute all of the expenditures that we put in front of you and put in front of the voter. It's really important. And obviously, if the revenue does not allow for that, then we would curb our expenditures.
That's me.
Sorry, lady.
My apologies. Go
I
ahead.
was trying to listen.
That's okay. I can read, where did you?
No, no,
Oh.
go ahead. It was just that,
No. Okay. And then, so that kind of goes along with your percentage for your increases and putting that limit on there. And then you mentioned the parking. The parking is a great thing. That's all part of the capital plan. That's a capital item. That is not an operating item. And having that distinction between what is operating, boots on the ground, is very different from capital. So does it belong in the budget guidance? Yeah, it probably should belong in the budget guidance. But you cannot have an expense like that in an operating budget. So it's really important that you look at them differently, and that's why I keep saying, work on your capital plan, focus on capital items, not day-to-day items that would be in your general operations part of it. And the last part of it is, Kim, you mentioned as well that you're sitting up there because voters voted for you. You're sitting there because voters believe in what you bring to the board. So I think this would be another opportunity. Lanny brought up about what the voters want. So if each of you have had voters and residents come to you and express items that they would like to see changed or be put in front on the board, on the budget, this is your opportunity to do so. So those are kind of my recommendations to work from. You're not going to do this overnight, and you do have new board members, and you do need to have those discussions. And I don't recommend that you rush it.
Thanks, Bill. Joe, go ahead.
Last year, we asked that we have a flat budget. And like you said, that has put us a bit behind. But I will also say that, when all this is said and done, this budget has to be approved by the citizens of Hartford. So be wary of that and just blanket, hey, we're going to raise it 5%, because they have to approve it. And if we raise it too much, then what they're going to do is reject that budget. So be cognizant of that when we go into this process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Other questions or comments? Dennis?
Thank you. On page 2, we've got the reduce salt budget when possible without reducing public safety. I'm curious if we need that in there, because we reduced that amount by 500 tons. I forget. It was a Becca suggestion way back. But we've already done that. I don't think we want to keep, I don't think we can cut it more. So I don't know that we need that in there. We've done it. Unless we increased it, I don't know why we have to have that in there now.
Good point, Dennis. Kim, do you have something?
Well, I guess I'm not sure, how much of a discussion do we want to have on this evening?
I hate to say it, this is when I'm like, it's up to y'all. I'm here until the end, so I'm here.
I mean, let's spend 5 or 10 minutes on it, and then we'll sort of regroup and see. I mean, we don't have to solve it all tonight, but we have a little bit of time, not quite on schedule, but we're not hours behind like we are sometimes.
So I don't know Kim talked about it. Maybe she can answer the question. Where do the ratings come into that? Because I see things are rated. Where does it, as far as like how high in a party scale is the rating?
I don't think it's really even relevant, because it was a rating scale that a former board member developed with a former board of members that. So, I mean, if you want, I can go try to dig up the old Excel worksheets that were used to come up with those ratings.
I remember sitting through them.
Yeah.
I remember sitting
So
through them,
it's from that, I think.
but I just don't understand where they.
So I would say disregard them would be my advice. I am going to disregard them for this
It was
purpose.
confusing because basically we decided after we went through that process and spent a lot of time doing it that, in our heads, this was number one. It didn't matter how we ranked it and weighted it. That was still number one in our head. And you might think something else was number one in your head. It didn't matter how it fell on that random scale. It was, it all came out to the same thing at the end. So
I
I
remember
think,
that discussion.
I mean, on
Yeah.
all those prioritization lists, the board members ranked the building a new pool very, very low in the process, but yet that is a capital expense that was approved and bonded by the voters.
And therein is what I'm getting at, by the fact that the voters wanted the pool.
True,
And
but
the
we
members
cannot
of
have
this board.
10,000
Yeah,
board members.
Yeah, this board, yeah, the board did not want the pool. The taxpayers wanted it, but that's where that citizen input is key to driving your budget.
And those
I-
people came to that meeting and were very vocal. So, and
Yeah.
now we have a pool. So I think it sort of worked out. I think I'm agreeing with you. Sorry, to bump the water
Yeah.
ball. But I'm agreeing with you. I think that's good. But I think that people saw, watched, heard, came, gave their input and said, we need this, we want this, this is what we want to do. And ultimately the board said yes, and it happened. So
But I don't think you're gonna get the same number of people showing up for like fire budget. We really want to get this budget going, like the homelessness group, we really want to get the homelessness thing pushed through. You're not gonna have the same numbers show up because we do have these passionate people in the town of Hartford for each and every one of these things.
absolutely.
Okay, but getting them to show up that's a difficult. And because they don't show up, does that mean we disregard them? Or should
No,
we put out a survey and say,
but I think we're here every other week or more, and they have ways to reach out to us, and they can reach out to us starting now. They can reach out to us all year. And as Tracy said, they've already mentioned to us on the street certain things that are important to them. So, some of the onus is on them. And if they don't like it, then they reject the budget. If they don't like us, then you don't get reelected. It's all part of that bigger picture, but there's got to be some accountability where you can't assume that we know what you want. And some people, their mail gets lost. They're not going to get the survey. There's going to be an excuse one way or the other. And I think we do the best that we can. So we want the input any way we can get it from everybody. That's the bottom line.
I do want to also caution on something. Now, we talked about the pool and that, but that's a capital expense. We're not talking capital expense. We're talking operational expense. Now after that capital expense, now we have to look at the pool because it will be an operational expense going forward. So some of these things we have to look at. And so and thank you, Kim. I'm kind of disregarding what we have here because it's blending those two things, and they're two very different things going forward into our next budget season. So I'm not sure that we should take that guidance as my colleague Kim said, and we need to designate our own guidance as we've done in the past.
Good point, Joe.
Right.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Well, I'm wondering also of the timing of when is the climate action plan supposed to come before us again?
That is a really good question. And I love that y'all are starting to think about these differences between operational and capital, and you have these plans coming forth. And we have a lot of things that come in that you all have to wade through. And it's hard work. So I just want to acknowledge this is hard work. The capital improvement plan is coming forth for a final climate action plan. Is coming forth for a presentation and final adoption next week on the 24th.
I will follow up directly with them, but I think they were going to do a little revision draft based on the public transportation thing. And so I guess what I noted previously when we had the presentation was, let's not get to the point where we're expected to adopt it and still want changes. And so I think I'll reach out to them directly and say, hey, remember that draft you were going to give us? I would like it before the 24th. Is that reasonable?
Yes, thank you.
And I guess it will be interesting for us to just keep in mind the goals of the climate action plan if it is to be adopted. I mean, currently it is not an adopted plan of the town, but if it is, then those would have impacts. The goals and strategies of that plan would have impacts on the operational budget as well. And I think this is sort of a little bit come up, but I also will have a guidance to explore. And I've talked with Mr. Cormier about this, but looking at what a redesigned public safety department might look like. And with the vacancies that we have in the police department. Anyway, so when we come to the public safety versions of the budget, I'm very interested to explore the concepts of maybe a chief or director of our public safety department with other elements instead of necessarily having police and fire, but potential for, would this be an appropriate time to sort of express that desire?
In terms of an operational budget, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So to shake out an entire department like a Yahtzee cup on the
I'm not even
ground,
suggesting that it
probably, yeah, it could be something, if that was something that you wanted to add into a line item to bring in outside work to take a look at what that looks like, knowing that those organizations, those consulting firms have a lot of demand and not a lot of supply these days, is definitely something that could be in this budget guidance in terms of exploring those options through the beginning process of that. Unfortunately, I left Berkeley just as that process was happening. But you know, that
fortunately for us.
but you know, that would kind of be that one bite of the elephant, right? Is to
Yep.
not say in the budget guidance, shake up an entire function, right? Like that's a multi-year, possibly capital and operating budget item. But to say, to give that one little bite, that one little operating thing that's looking at that one little beginning piece, which allows the staff to do that work within that year.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Gail. Go ahead.
So going along with that, that would have to be, for it to be in the guidance, it would have to be agreed upon
Mhm.
by everybody in the board to put it on, here. Like last year, we had, that was agreed upon to consider a community wellness department.
Mhm.
So, you know, that was board agreed. So those are great things. Those are discussions that you need to have and vet them. So prior to the board giving us the final document, if it's agreed upon, then that definitely should be
100%.
All right, that sounds good for a good start on this, and we'll think about it some more, and we'll revisit this in future agendas. So bring us to Gate Street closure updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things with Gate Street and Fairview Terrace that we wanted to do is continually give updates on the process of this. So the Department of Public Works will continually update us as well as the town manager and report. So thus far, on July 29th, the director of the Department of Public Works met with our 3 pre-qualified water sources consultants on site to review the proposed relocation of the water line currently on Gate Street. Proposals are due to the town by August 20th. Also, a detour and signage plan has been developed. Department of Public Works staff will order the signs and post this week. They will also mark out the locations which will need to be cleared and dig safe prior to installation. With excessive shipping and manufacturing delays and also material shortages, they do not have a good time frame for receiving the signs and posts, and would typically be less than 1 week. So we're just waiting for those. Once the signs have arrived, the staff will install them, cover them up, and the signs will be uncovered when the closures are in place. The Department of Public Works staff will begin advertising the closures 1 full week prior through listserv, social media, and standard press release.
If you don't. Questions or comments? Any?
One thing that I did not hear you say that I really think should be addressed is, when are they gonna fill in the cracks and the holes that are currently in the sidewalk so we don't have more damage done? That's, I think, would be priority number 1, to make sure that we don't have any more damage done that's already happened. So where is that taking place at?
So one of what they're going to do is the remaining $30,000 is to make sure that the maintenance from and that was from the maintenance of fiscal year 2021 is so some of the water damage that doesn't go in. Once they close the street, then they'll begin to do that. But that, once again, is a capital improvement that we have to improve to the budget for to make those allotments.
So until we close the street, we're still letting it deteriorate.
I walked up and down it today, and there's definitely some fresh patching. I don't know if it is the final product, but there was a lot of fresh, just patching asphalt on the walkway. Didn't notice the roadway, the driving part, but the walkway had a lot of fresh asphalt.
And if I may, and that's one reason why they're going to close the street, so they can do the more comprehensive road work, but we have to approve it in our capital improvement as well.
So you mentioned the rerouting of wastewater lines within the road, correct? So they're just mapping out how to do that. There's nothing is that definitely going to happen, or is that?
No, they're just finding out how they're going to do it, what they're going to do. That has not been approved as of yet.
Okay, so there's going to be no soil work to make that happen this year.
Not this year.
Okay, that's.
And once again, anything that is more in depth, I would want Hannah to come in here and explain to us what those things are. Because she and I see a citizen from Gateshead, and I think you live in that area as well. No, you live in Queechee, I'm sorry. Dennis does. And so I just want to make sure that we are getting that information out on a continual basis of what is happening, so it's not blindsiding anyone in that living space.
She doesn't have an anticipated date done for closure.
At this point, not until we get signs and everything, but once that happens, then we'll know a little better.
Okay. I'll bring us through commission meeting reports. Why don't we just go down the line? We'll start with you, Kim. If you have anything you want to add here.
No, planning commission last night was canceled. We did the Hartford revolving loan fund meeting last week. Sorry, go to someone else first, because I don't remember. But it was,
Mike,
there's been a lot that happened.
I will be attending the school board meeting tomorrow evening.
Okay.
Let you know how that goes.
Perfect. Great. Joe?
We've been talking a lot about the pool, and it is progressing. Parks and Rec is on it, and believe it or not, it is under budget as well as on time.
Wow.
And so for those things to happen is particularly with delays that are happening all across the country is pretty amazing. So we should have a pool on time next year.
Perfect. Alan?
Yeah. So Resilient Hartford is moving along with the Clifford Park Food Forest. So they had their third design meeting earlier this month with folks at the West Hartford Library. And so they had Karen Gainey from Permaculture Solutions go over the goals and design qualities that they want to pursue with the park. And their next step is going to be to present a design of the proposed September tree planting. They're going to start to plant the trees at the they must have just had this on August 12th, Parks and Recreation Commission. So I'll get the update on how that proposal process went. And then they're soon going to be sharing the design more broadly with the community, which is very exciting. So we'll look out for that and see what they've come up with the design. And then just a quick update on the Hartford Ad Hoc Committee on Emergency Shelter. I know that we've been getting some questions and concerns about the committee and its role from the public recently. And so we are thinking in our next agenda, which is going to be on Thursday, our next meeting, is to really be talking about the role of that committee. We know that one of the charges, I just want to pull it up so I quote it correctly. If I can find it. Yep. One of the charges, at its founding was to investigate the regulatory obstacles to the creation of portable micro dwellings to provide shelter for people experiencing homelessness. So a lot of questions have been coming up around the proposed changes to RV regulations and why we're doing that. And so that ties back to one of the original charges of this committee. And again, that was an option to be thinking about what are safe and regulated ways for in-house folks to have some kind of temporary shelter, knowing that it's not a permanent solution, but that it is one in an emergency situation, which COVID has certainly presented us with, is needed. And so I'm happy to keep fielding questions from community members and appreciate the folks who have reached out, but just wanted to go back to that kind of original charge. So we are so far moving forward on, there was just an informal feedback meeting that two of our committee members had with the planning department, just to get some guidance and ask some questions to prepare for a proposal to go forward to the planning commission. So that's a longer step process that they're just really still kind of in the beginning stages of. But yeah, that's where we're at there.
Thanks, Ally.
The charge of the, how's this?
It's on the website.
It's on, yeah, Tracy, where does that live, the charge of the committee on the website?
I'm going to look at Kim because I usually pull them from my own internal.
I have the document. I know I
files.
sent it to you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
That's the chart.
That's the charge, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ally. Planning, you probably haven't been to any meetings yet, so.
Right. I just got out of the hospital for
I'm just asking. I'm giving you the opportunity to share. If you're
No.
right, don't expect.
No, the word would be no, I'm sorry.
Okay. Dennis, go ahead. Nothing? Okay. Thank you. Kim?
So the HBR, Hartford Business Revolving Loan Fund Committee did meet on, it was August 4th. And they have produced this really excellent brochure to spread the word, to tell more people about the funds that are accessible to Hartford businesses through the very excellent interest rates of the Hartford Revolving Loan Fund. So if you know of anyone who's interested, there's an excellent brochure that we can share with them now. And I just want to add one more thing that I forgot during public comments, which was to also thank Lisa O'Neill in the town clerk's office for pulling off a special election
Yes.
with short staff and et cetera. So that's all I've got.
Exactly. Kim, maybe can you get that information, what you just spoke of about the revolving loan, if there's a link or something where they can find that too, so it can be in the minute notes, so people can find it.
Oh, yes, I definitely kind of just had it up, but I don't think it's finalized yet. I think
Okay.
the last meeting we were at, they were just tweaking it a little bit.
Yeah,
So
okay.
as soon as they give a final copy, then I will
Okay, thank you.
try to remember to do that.
So the update for the tree board, they meet once a month, and they pick one tree of the month, and for the life of me, I can't remember what that is. So it's a mystery. So if you want to go out and find out, go and check it out on their website, and I'm not telling you what it is. That's where we are. Okay. I think that's it for commission meeting reports. So consent agenda is up next. Anyone like-
I'm happy to
Yeah.
move the motion, but I just have a question about one thing on the manifest first, if I may. Which,
Let me open it before. There we go.
hold on, let me see if it's going to be
The 812 or the 86, Kim?
8-6. And it was basically, I was curious about this true. I noticed it at like 5 o'clock. I didn't even want to email you again. It's the mowing of the parks and like it's contracted out mowing. $3,775.
What page are you on, Kim?
I gotta find it again. I'm sorry. Why don't we, I'm the one making the motion. I can ask you about it later because I'm sure it's fine. I'm just curious about, do we typically contract for mowing the parks?
Why do I think there was the same question that Dennis asked maybe about?
Spencer Powers, was that
Yeah.
Dennis? Was that your
Yeah, I think it
question?
was.
I did ask about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, lawn service at Watson, Ratcliffe, Maxfield, Kilowatt. And when I looked under that,
Page 15.
what's the big?
Yeah, I don't, it sounds like it's not the question I had.
Next one, okay.
I can totally follow up on this.
Okay, outdoor home services,
Yes.
The line at 512,318 is the contracted services. but
Mhm.
it's
I
like-
see the vendors outdoor home services LLC.
What's a Churser? Is that what?
Since this looks to be a Scott Hausler thing and Scott is actually on vacation, as an aside, I'm super excited that my staff are actually getting vacations this year after that year. And I'm gonna say lawn service probably on the up and up. Let me circle back with you once we
If-
get
if
Scott.
I Bring it to you again next week or 2 weeks from now.
Yeah,
I would just mention that it's not like mowing or cleanup, that it's possibly chemical treatment.
it might be treatment for the sports lawns, which we have to treat in a very different way than just our edible landscapes. That's a good hypothesis as well. But let me check in with Scott once he's back next week.
If you think, you got a lot of things. All right.
I have a question on manifest as well, so. Is it, okay, on the page 12 of the manifest, under Maurice Ottawa Truck Incorporated, we got $5,600 total here for a lot of trailers. And I don't understand what we had to spend $1,400 in each trailer for.
I'm
I can answer.
still trying to figure out which
It's
payment
one
manifest.
Trailer, I think the different departments paid for it. It's a quarter of the trailer from police and 2/4 from fire and,
So it's a purchase of a trailer then? not-
right. But it
Oh,
was
okay.
divided up amongst departments to pay for it.
Okay, now, okay, that makes sense. All right. And then there was something else on here. I can't find it right now. There was like one vehicle that we paid like $3,000 on for someplace. If I can find it. I'll have to get it to you later. It seemed like a lot of money to pay out on one vehicle.
And
When they say C something like C6 or something, is that a highway vehicle?
So, how all of this works in terms of how we manage the payment manifest is that certain thresholds, the department directors approve theirs on their own and those go to the manifest. So, I'm looking at a 24-page payment manifest for August 6th. I don't have this all memorized. And what happens typically, I know Dennis usually emails me Sunday night and I go to my department directors and say, please provide background on, this piece of office equipment or whatever. So the threshold of $4,000 underneath that, I don't actually make those approvals. Those approvals are with the department directors. So I don't have this information at the tip of my fingertips. Usually folks ask and we get that background with the department.
Nice to know it's a $4,000. That's the one. Okay, that's nice to know.
Kim, go ahead.
And also, I think this may have been in your select board guidelines that you sent us recently, but Laney, a good practice, which I just asked that manifest question because I saw it at like 5 o'clock, but usually I try, and I think Dennis does too, maybe other board members, if we have questions about little specific things that we do email them before the meeting, and then Tracy has time to check with the staff to get back to us. So I apologize because I started that with a question about this manifest. But typically I would email that question so that it doesn't take everyone's time for us to go through little concerns like that. So does that make sense?
Yeah, and sometimes, we ask the department directors to come and sometimes they take the night off. And that's kind of what we try to do is let them have that time off if they're not on the schedule.
Right. I mean, if I email you on Monday morning and you may get back to me by before Tuesday afternoon before the meeting. I'm not asking them.
I love,
Answer.
Dennis always hits me up on Sunday night.
I
So
know.
I know when I open my email at 8 a.m., I know I got my Dennis email, and I'm not kind of waiting for it. I think I even know around what time now Dennis emails me his payment manifest question.
We're such
I'll try
creatures
to
of
stay
habit.
on schedule. But thank you very much for all your replies. It's
If
been,
if you don't email me, Dennis, I'm going to get worried.
Right. Mr. Chair, will you entertain a motion?
Yes, go ahead.
I move that the select board approve the payroll ending August 7, 2021, the meeting minutes of July 27 and August 12th, 2021, as well as the AP manifests of August 6th and August 10th, 2021, and the select board meeting dates of September 7th and September 21st, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Ally, any questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Okay, that will bring us to executive session, which we don't have. So next up will be adjournment select board meeting. So we're entertaining a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I adjourn this meeting.
And is there a second? My mic, no
9:10.
discussion. 9:10. Thank you very much. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next week.